The car died with a final hiccup, a metallic groan that faded along with the air conditioning. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, broken only by the frantic thumping of Sarah's own heart. She was 8 months pregnant, late for her prenatal checkup, and now stranded in the middle of the street, at the busiest intersection downtown, with the gear shift locked and the dashboard lights dead. Her enormous belly pressed against the steering wheel, the baby kicking hard, as if protesting the sudden paralysis. She tried turning the key again. Nothing, just a dry, impotent click. With a sigh that came from the depths of exhaustion, she grabbed her phone, dialed her husband's number, Mike. The call rang and went to voicemail. "Mike, honey, the car broke down. I think it's the battery. I'm on Main Street, right in front of that glass-fronted hotel. Can you come help me?" She hung up, her hands shaking. Her back throbbed with a dull, constant ache. Before she could try again, a text from him popped up. "In an important meeting. Can't leave now. Call the insurance, that's what we pay for. Update me later." The air escaped Sarah's lungs. She closed her eyes for a second, feeling the loneliness of the situation tighten around her throat. She obeyed, called the insurance company, explained the situation with a voice that tried to sound steady. They were polite, efficient, said the tow truck would arrive in up to 40 minutes. She knew what that meant in the city's chaotic traffic. An eternity. She climbed out of the car with difficulty, the weight of her belly throwing off her center of gravity. The concrete sidewalk was scorching. She leaned carefully against the hot side of the vehicle, sliding down until she sat on the curb, her aching legs stretched out in front. The afternoon sun beat down on her face. She pulled a handkerchief from her purse and wiped the back of her neck, where sweat was starting to trickle. People passed by, some glancing with pity, most ignoring. Just another pregnant woman abandoned to her fate in the city heat. She just wanted to be home, lying on the couch with her swollen feet elevated. The doctor's appointment was now a lesser worry compared to this exhausting mishap. That's when the soft whir of the hotel's revolving door beside her caught her attention. A mechanical, discreet noise, but it sounded loud in the forced quiet of her wait. She turned her head, her gaze empty without expectation, and froze. Mike emerged through the glass portal, a relaxed and satisfied smile on his face. He adjusted the collar of his white dress shirt, a gesture she knew well, one he always made after freshening up. His expression was that of someone who had just experienced something good, something comfortable, far from work pressure. Sarah's pulse raced. The blood seemed to run colder in her veins, but what made her stomach contract with brutal force, nearly taking her breath away, was the person who appeared beside him. A woman, elegant, wearing an impeccable grey pantsuit, brown hair pulled back in a low bun. Sarah knew that silhouette, that way of walking, knew it very well. She blinked, trying to process. The world around her seemed to slow down, the traffic sounds turning into a muffled buzz. The woman wasn't a stranger. They knew each other, and Sarah knew exactly from where. The face was still turned sideways, but it was unmistakable. Her right hand gripped the rough edge of the curb. The fingers of her other hand pressed against her belly, where the baby was now moving, agitated, as if sensing the torrent of adrenaline flooding her mother's body. The couple stopped on the sidewalk, still under the hotel awning, laughing softly at something. Mike touched the woman's elbow, an intimate, casual touch. It was at that moment that the woman turned, her full face toward the street, her gaze sweeping over Mike and, by catastrophic chance, meeting Sarah's. Sarah's eyes narrowed. The blood that had seemed icy now burned in her face. She didn't scream, didn't cry. Her lips curved into a smile. Cold, controlled, lethal. The hand that had trembled with fatigue was now firmly closed around her phone. She already knew exactly what to do. With a fluid, calculated motion, she raised the phone. The screen was clean, reflective. Her breathing, by some miracle, had steadied. The shake in her hands was gone, replaced by a steel firmness. She turned on the camera, framed her own face, the tiredness under her eyes, the strands of hair stuck to her forehead by humidity, the skin marked by pregnancy, and then adjusted the angle. In the background, perfectly clear through the lens, Mike and Victoria, the mother-in-law of her own daughter, still shared that intimate closeness, unsuspecting, smiles still fresh on their lips. The digital shutter made a silent click. The sound was muffled by the city noise, but to her it rang like thunder. Without hesitation, her fingers danced across the screen. Opened the family group chat in the Messenger app. That noisy group, full of memes, dinner photos, and plans for the future. The future that had just been imploded. Selected the photo. Her own image, pregnant and helpless on the sidewalk, and behind, the portrait of betrayal in its rawest form. Him, in a white shirt, relaxed. Her, in a pantsuit, the mother of her daughter's boyfriend. Typing the caption was the easiest part. The words emerged with cutting clarity. "Look who I found here all cozy, by chance." Her finger hovered over send for a fraction of a second. One last deep breath, filling her lungs with hot air. She pressed the screen. The explosion was immediate and digital. First, a 3-second silence. Then, her phone started vibrating and beeping non-stop, convulsively, a swarm of notifications threatening to crash the device. It was her daughter, Jessica, who started the frenzy. A long voice message that Sarah didn't need to listen to know the content. The instant view was enough. The text message followed in all caps. "Mom, this is a joke, right? Answer me." Next, Jessica's boyfriend, Alex, son of Victoria, jumped into the group. His messages were sharp, full of exclamation points. "Mom, what are you doing? What does this mean? Call me now, someone explain this, the real mother-in-law, Mrs. Thompson, Mike's mother, a normally reserved woman, sent a string of question marks and a fragmented phrase. My God, I can't believe Mike, for the love of God, Victoria, how could you?" Sarah's aunt, Betty, came in like a spinning machine gun. Quick, successive messages, no punctuation. "Sarah, my angels, where are you? Mike, you scoundrel. Victoria, you're a snake in human clothing. Someone go get Sarah immediately. Jessica, my flower, don't cry. This is a disgrace." Sarah's phone wouldn't stop. It was a beacon of chaos, illuminating her impassive face on the sidewalk. She held it firmly, watching the notifications pile up, each vibration a small hammer blow to the coffin of her marriage. Across the street, Mike's phone started ringing too. A professional tone, insistent. He pulled the device from his pocket with an annoyed expression, still facing Victoria. When his gaze met the screen, his face changed. The color drained from it in the blink of an eye, leaving a grayish pallor. His lips parted. His fingers trembled, holding the phone. He looked at Victoria, whose amusement had turned to confusion, and then slowly, as if moving against an overwhelming gravitational force, his head turned toward the opposite sidewalk. His eyes met Sarah's. She held his gaze, the phone still in her hand, the sent image glowing on the screen like a macabre trophy. There was no anger in her expression, just a deep, icy knowledge, the realization. Mike paled even more. It looked like his legs might give way. He swallowed hard, his hand instinctively going to his chest as if checking his own heartbeat. "Sarah?" The name came out as a hoarse whisper, lost in the avenue's noise. Victoria, sensing the catastrophic shift in the air, followed Mike's gaze. When she saw Sarah sitting on the curb, phone in hand, her composed face crumbled. Blood rushed to her cheeks, a blotch of pure panic. She took a step back, as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. Mike seemed to compose himself for a second, the successful man's facade trying to rise over the rubble. He pulled away from Victoria as if she were on fire and started crossing the street, dodging honking cars, his movements uncoordinated. "Honey, Sarah, for God's sake, calm down." He got close, his breathing ragged. The scent of his cologne, one she knew well, mixed with a strange floral aroma, Victoria's perfume. "This isn't what you think. I can explain everything." Sarah didn't move. She stayed seated, her prominent belly back against the hot car body. She looked at him, then at Victoria, who remained frozen across the street, and back to him. "Isn't it?" Sarah's voice came out low, but laced with irony so sharp it seemed to cut the air. "Then explain. Explain to our daughter, who's crying her eyes out. Explain to her boyfriend, who's freaking out in the group." She paused dramatically, her piercing gaze fixed on Mike before turning to Victoria. "And explain to his mother, who's right there, dear. Please, enlighten us." Victoria seemed to want to speak. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She opened her arms in an empty gesture of helplessness. Mike tried again, sweating, his shirt sticking to his back. It was a business meeting. Victoria has a contact, an investor. We were closing a deal. Sarah laughed. A dry sound without humor. Meeting at the hotel, in the middle of the afternoon, all cuddled up. She shook her head slowly. Give me some credit, Mike. We can lack everything except stupidity. At that moment, a familiar black car screeched to a stop behind Sarah's broken-down vehicle. The driver's door opened, and Jessica jumped out, her face swollen and wet with tears. Her eyes, inherited from her father, were red and wide with shock. She ran to her mother, completely ignoring her dad. Mom, tell me it's not true," she cried, kneeling on the sidewalk beside Sarah, her hands clutching her mother's arm. Seconds later, another car arrived at high speed, parking against traffic. Alex leaped out, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. He didn't head toward his mother. He marched straight to Mike. "What did you do?" Alex's voice came out shrill, loaded with newborn hatred. "What did you do to my family, to your family?" Sarah's family group chat kept exploding. Mrs. Thompson now sent long, tearful voice messages. Aunt Betty threatened to call the cops. A distant cousin had already shared the screenshot on social media with the caption, "Think my family just exploded." Mike was cornered between his crying daughter, the furious almost son-in-law, and his wife sitting on the ground, the owner of all the truth. He tried to talk to Jessica. "Jessica, my princess, please let me explain." Jessica turned to him, and the look she gave her father made Mike step back. "Don't call me princess. You don't have that right anymore." The pressure was too much. Victoria, still across the street, saw her son confronting Mike and seemed to snap out of her trance. She ran to the scene, her elegant shoes clicking fast on the asphalt. "Alex, please, calm down," she begged, trying to touch her son's arm. He turned to her, and the disappointment on his face was more devastating than any shout. "You... with Jessica's dad? Mom, how could you? You had dinner at their house last Sunday. You helped me pick out the ring." Victoria opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. The facade was crumbling in such a public and humiliating way that no excuse could be spun. The lover, the daughter's mother-in-law, tried to invent one. It was a business meeting, son. Misunderstanding." But she cut her off. Sarah's voice, calm and clear, sliced through the chaos like a blade. "Meeting at the hotel? In the middle of the afternoon, all cuddled up? Give me some credit." The whole family turned into chaos. Voice messages, photos, screenshots, shouts, everyone demanding explanations. And a bigger bomb was still coming, pressed from all sides, by her son's devastated look, by Sarah's silent fury, by the public shame. Something in Victoria broke. Her shoulders, once elegantly straight, slumped. She looked at Mike, seeking some support, but he was frozen, a man watching his world crumble in slow motion. "Fine!" Victoria's voice came out shrill, loaded with held-back tears. "Fine! Enough!" A heavy, abrupt silence fell over the group. Even the phone notifications seemed to pause for a moment. Victoria took a deep breath, looking at her son, avoiding everyone else's eyes. We've been having an affair for 6 months." The confession came out as a rough whisper. "We're in love." Jessica let out a muffled groan, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. Mike closed his eyes as if he could hide from that reality. Victoria continued, her voice gaining a bit more strength, a spark of defiance mixed with desperation. "He was going to divorce after the baby was born. We had already planned it. We were going to start a life together." The final revelation fell like a guillotine. It wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated betrayal. A cold plan that used Sarah's pregnancy as a timeline for a new life. The bomb wasn't just the betrayal, but the level of coldness behind it. Everyone looked at Sarah, expecting a collapse, screams, tears. She took a deep breath, a long, clean one. She rested her hand on the tense curve of her belly, feeling the baby move, a life that was only hers, not theirs. She stood up with difficulty, a slow and deliberate movement that required all her weight and dignity. Jessica stepped back, looking at her mother with a mix of pity and admiration. Sarah looked at Mike, then at Victoria. Her expression was one of terrifying serenity. Great. The word came out calm, clear, and mortally final. Because tomorrow, I'm filing for divorce. And while you deal with the mess you made... She paused, her gaze sweeping the devastated faces around her. I'll take care of my baby. And my freedom. At that moment, as if directed by a cosmic script, the orange tow truck from the insurance company arrived, stopping behind Sarah's car with a short honk. Without another word, Sarah picked up her purse from the ground, gave a squeeze to Jessica's shoulder, completely ignored Mike and Victoria, who looked like statues of salt in the midst of the chaos they had created, walked to the tow truck and spoke a few low words to the driver, who nodded, visibly embarrassed by the tension in the air. The driver got out and quickly started preparing Sarah's car to be towed. She then headed to the truck's cab, opened the door, and with visible difficulty but impeccable posture, climbed in. Didn't look back, sat in the passenger seat, closed the door. The sound of the outside world was muffled. She looked out the window, seeing the silhouette of her husband and the lover shrunk on the sidewalk, embraced not by passion, but by desperation and public humiliation. The driver got in, gave her a hesitant glance. "Let's go," said Sarah, her voice firm. The tow truck shifted gears and pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the broken pieces of two families. That day, pregnant and betrayed, she didn't break. She awakened. The tow truck's engine rumbled, a low and steady sound filling the cab. Through the window, the scenery of her previous life paraded in slow motion. Mike and Victoria were still on the sidewalk, two diminutive figures cornered by the circle of people forming. A phone fell from Mike's hand and shattered on the asphalt. He didn't even seem to notice. The image of them shrinking in the rearview mirror was the last page of a chapter she had just slammed shut. Sarah turned her gaze to her own hands, resting on her belly. The adrenaline that had kept her steady was starting to fade, leaving behind a trail of fine, deep tremors. She felt them in her fingers, in her legs, an internal chill that the cab's stuffy heat couldn't warm. She breathed deeply, focusing on the sensation of the baby moving. That life was a fact, an anchor in the absolute chaos. The driver, a middle-aged man with calloused hands steady on the wheel, gave her a sideways look of concern. "Everything okay, ma'am? Need a doctor? You're looking really pale." She shook her head, unable to force words. Her voice had retreated to some deep place inside her. She clenched her jaws to stop them from trembling and nodded. Another brief gesture. Her eyes remained dry, burning with desert-like dryness. The phone in her lap kept vibrating, an insistent, mad buzz against her thigh. She didn't look. She knew it was the world collapsing in the family group, the tentacles of the scandal trying to reach her inside that metal bubble. "Where are we taking the car?" the driver asked, his voice cautious. Sarah swallowed hard. Her own voice sounded strange to her when it finally came out. "To my house, please." She gave him the address. The house. Her house. The word had a new taste, a taste of territory that needed to be claimed and defended. The trip was a blur. She didn't see the buildings, the traffic lights, the people. She saw Mike's relaxed smile coming out of the hotel. She saw Victoria's face, the mother of her daughter's boyfriend, the woman who had asked her the previous Sunday if she needed help setting up the baby's room. The anger hadn't arrived yet. There was only a vacuum, a vast and icy space where a family structure had once existed. And in the center of that vacuum, a solid and cold core of decision. The tow truck stopped in front of the house. The house she and Mike had bought 5 years earlier, when Jessica entered her teens and they thought they needed more space for the future. The future. "Need help getting inside, ma'am?" The man seemed genuinely uncomfortable, not knowing how to handle this pregnant, motionless and silent woman. "I'm fine, thank you." She climbed down from the cab, her legs heavy as lead. The car keys were with the tow truck, but she had the house ones. The door opened with a familiar click. The interior air smelled of cleanliness and emptiness. Mike wouldn't be home today, maybe never again. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, eyes closed. The house's silence was oppressive. Then, the phone vibrated again. It was Jessica. The call this time, not a message. Sarah answered. "Mom?" Jessica's voice was a thread, a hoarse breath of pain. Alex, broke up with me. Said his family is a bad joke, that he wants nothing to do with people like us." Her daughter's pain pierced Sarah's ice shield like a hot knife. A wave of nausea rose in her throat. She slid down the door until she sat on the hallway floor, her back burning. "Jessica, my girl, how could he do this, Mom? How could Dad? And Victoria? I liked her. She was cool." The crying became uncontrollable. Sarah pressed the phone to her ear, as if she could hug her daughter through the line. I know, love. Listen to me. It's not your fault, not ours. It's theirs, only theirs. You didn't lose Alex. He lost someone like you, and Danatano, Dad." Her voice faltered. She breathed deeply. "Your dad made a choice, and now we're going to make ours. Where are you? I want to come to your house." "I'm home. Come. This is your house, Jessica. It always will be." She hung up. The strength that had kept her upright was draining fast. She dragged herself to the living room couch and collapsed. The phone, now silent, was full of notifications. She saw the family lawyer's name on the screen. Probably Mike trying to control the damage. Ignored it. Instead, she opened the messaging app. The family group was in a frenzy of over 500 messages. She saw screenshots of her photo being shared in other groups. She saw Aunt Betty threatening to sue Victoria for moral damages to the family. She saw Mrs. Thompson begging someone to tell her it was a nightmare. It was the media circus of her own life, and she, sitting in the center of the arena, was no longer the main actress. She was a spectator. A new message appeared, this time private. From Mike. "Sarah, we need to talk." This got out of control. She spilled everything under pressure. "It wasn't exactly like that. I need to explain. Call me, please." His words were lukewarm, weak, the desperate attempt of a drowning man. She read and didn't reply. Explain? What was there to explain? The photo was the explanation. Victoria's confession was the explanation. Her daughter's crying was the explanation. Night fell over the city and the silent house. Jessica arrived, eyes swollen, and threw herself into her mother's arms on the couch. They cried together, not for the loss of Mike, but for the loss of normalcy, trust, the image they had of their own family. As Jessica fell asleep, exhausted in her mother's lap, Sarah picked up her phone and, with a calm that seemed surreal to her, searched for the name of the best divorce lawyer in the city. Not the one from Mike's firm. Another, known for being ruthless. Sent him a brief email. Need an urgent consultation. Subject: divorce with asset complexity and custody of unborn minor. My situation is as follows. She described the facts clinically, dryly. The 6-month affair, the public confession, the lover's relation to the family, the 8-month pregnancy. In writing, she transformed her pain into data, her betrayal into legal arguments. It was a process of sanitization, of cauterizing the wound. The next morning, the media storm hadn't subsided. The story with the photo had leaked to a local gossip blog. Mike and Victoria's faces were there, pixelated but recognizable. The headline, "Family Scandal. Executive cheats on pregnant wife with daughter's own mother-in-law." Mike tried calling her 20 more times. She didn't answer, blocked his number. His apartment, a pied-à-terre he used for working late, had become his refuge, according to what she learned through Jessica, who still had her dad's number unblocked. Victoria had apparently been kicked out of her own home by her son. Alex had gone to live with his father, Victoria's ex-husband, who spared no words on social media, calling his ex the lowest names. The web of destruction that Sarah had woven with a single photo spread, burning everything around it. And she, at the epicenter, was strangely calm. The meeting with the lawyer 2 days later was in a sober office with a view of the city. Dr. James Harlan was a man in his mid-50s, soft-spoken with piercing eyes. "Your email was quite elucidating, Mrs. Sarah," he said, hands clasped on the desk. You have a very strong position. The public confession is a powerful weapon. And the pregnancy, sir, well, the pregnancy puts him in an extremely vulnerable position before a judge. She nodded. I don't just want the divorce. I want full custody of my son. I want the house. I want alimony that reflects the lifestyle Mike provided me and that he deliberately destroyed. He's not keeping anything we built while he was building a parallel life. The coldness of her words surprised even her. Dr. Harlan noted something. Mike has resources. He'll fight. And this story, public, it's a double-edged sword. It can sway the judge in your favor, but it can also make him more sympathetic to him, arguing persecution. He has no moral ground to argue anything, Sarah retorted, her voice firm. He traded his family for a woman who's grandmother to his own grandchild. Public opinion is the least of my concerns. At that exact moment, her phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. Sarah, it's Victoria. I desperately need to talk to you. It's about Mike. He's not the person you think. There are things you don't know. Sarah showed the phone to the lawyer. I recommend not responding, he said calmly. It's an attempt at manipulation. Let her talk alone. She agreed, but the message planted a seed. There are things you don't know. Leaving the office with a legal strategy outlined and the divorce petition to be filed the next day, Sarah felt the weight of her new reality. She was no longer the wife, the partner. She was a pregnant woman alone, preparing for a legal and emotional war. On the way home, she passed a park, saw couples strolling, kids playing, normal life, which now seemed from another planet. She stopped on a bench, shortness of breath tightening her chest. The contractions, false or not, that she'd felt occasionally for weeks, gripped her belly harder. She leaned forward, hands pressing her belly, breathing deeply. That's when she saw him. Across the park, near a kiosk, was Mike. He was unrecognizable. The impeccable shirt was wrinkled, beard unshaven. He was talking on the phone, gesturing agitatedly, and he wasn't alone. Victoria was beside him, but her body was rigid, distant. They were arguing. Sarah could see Victoria's sharp gestures, Mike's exasperated expression. The scene was pathetic. The forbidden passion, the great love that had justified destroying two families, had turned, in just days, into a petty argument in a public park. The enchantment broke. The ugly, complicated reality had set in. Mike looked up, as if feeling the weight of her gaze. His eyes met Sarah's across the distance. His expression was one of deep, absolute despair. He said something to Victoria and started crossing the park towards Sarah, almost running. Sarah didn't move. Sitting on the bench, hands on her belly, she watched him approach. He was a stranger, a man whose world had collapsed and who was now desperately seeking anything to hold on to. Probably her. Sarah, he called, his voice hoarse. Sarah, you have to listen to me. She said nothing, just stared at him as he got closer, her own silence the most insurmountable barrier of all. Mike crossed the park like a pursued man, his steps unbalanced on the dirt path. His breathing formed irregular clouds in the cool afternoon air. The distance between them was about 50 yards, but each step seemed to cost supernatural effort. Sarah didn't move. Her fingers gently pressed the side of her belly, where the baby gave a firm kick, as if protesting the agitation. She felt the phone holster against her thigh, the dress fabric damp with sweat on her back. The scene was surreal, her sitting on a park bench, 8 months pregnant, watching her own husband, a desperate stranger, run toward her. "Sarah!" he shouted again, his voice breaking in the middle of the park. "Please!" He got to about 5 yards away, panting, the smell of sweat and anxiety preceding him. His eyes were red, sunken. His right hand trembled uncontrollably. "He won't answer me," Mike said, words coming out staggered. "Alex blocked me, Jessica too. Even my mom won't talk to me." He swallowed hard, looking at her like she was the last lifeline in a shipwreck. You need to talk to them. Explain it wasn't exactly like that." Sarah maintained silence. Her face was a mask of icy calm. Only her dark, fixed eyes showed the intensity of observation. Victoria arrived behind him, but keeping distance, Her once perfect face was swollen, mascara smudged under her eyes. "Mike, stop this," she said, her voice low and tired. "It's ugly." He turned to her, a flash of anger in his gaze. "Ugly? Ugly was you blurting that out on the street, talking about our plan." "Our plan?" Victoria laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "It was your plan, Mike, always yours. I was confused." The baby kicked again, harder. Sarah felt a contraction. This one was deeper, a grip starting in her back and wrapping around the front of her belly. It lasted about 20 seconds. She didn't blink. Mike turned his attention back to Sarah, ignoring Victoria. "They're going to destroy me in the divorce. You sent the photo to everyone, even to my firm partner. He messaged me this morning. They're considering my exit." The contraction passed. Sarah breathed deeply through her nose, out through her mouth. "Sarah, please." Mike's voice broke. He took a step forward, trembling hand extended. "I screwed up. A monumental screw-up. I know, but we can fix it. For the baby." It was the wrong word, the wrong trigger. Sarah's hand clenched into a fist. The calm she had fought for cracked, not with a bang, but with a dry, dangerous snap. "Fix it?" Her voice came out low but loaded with acid that made Mike recoil. "You think this," she pointed to her own belly, "is a broken piece of furniture? You and your daughter's boyfriend's mother make a plan to trade me in like an outdated model, and now you talk about fixing. Honey, it wasn't—" "Stop calling me honey." The phrase was a bullseye shot. "The only fixing happening is me cutting you out of my life like the tumor you are." Victoria tried to intervene, her voice a mix of shame and desperation. "Sarah, I know you won't believe it, but he fooled me too. Said your marriage was a sham, that you were only with him for the money." Sarah shifted her gaze from Mike to Victoria, and the contempt in her eyes made the woman blush. "And you believed it?" Sarah asked, her voice icy. "Believed that a woman who gave up her own career to help raise his daughter, who planned every detail of this pregnancy, who was 8 months carrying his child, was only in it for the money? Or did you just want to believe because it was more convenient?" Victoria opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The fragile defense crumbled. Another contraction. Stronger. Longer. This time Sarah couldn't fully hide it. She leaned forward, one hand pressing the base of her back. Her fingers whitened from gripping the bench. Mike noticed. "Sarah, you okay?" She didn't answer. Breathed. 1, 2, 3. The contractions started to ease. 10, 11, 12. Relieved. "Is it the baby?" His voice had a tone of genuine panic. "Is it time?" The question hung in the air. Time. Time for what? The birth, the final judgment, everything. That's when Sarah's phone rang. The ringtone was the one she'd set for the maternity ward. She answered, keeping her eyes fixed on Mike. "Mrs. Sarah, this is Nurse Lisa from the clinic. We're seeing the data from your remote fetal monitor, detecting a pattern of regular contractions. Are you feeling them?" Sarah looked at Mike, then Victoria, 2 ruined lives standing before her. "Yes," she said, her voice strangely calm. "Every 5 minutes or so." "Great. Can you head to the maternity ward? Your file is here. Dr. Reynolds has been notified. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up. The park seemed to go silent. Even the birds stopped singing. Mike and Victoria stared at her, comprehension slowly dawning. Is it the baby?" Mike asked again, his voice a whisper. Sarah stood from the bench. The movement was slow, deliberate, full of sacred weight. The pain in her back was a constant presence now, a familiar companion. "Yes," she said, looking directly at him. "It's the baby. My baby." She started walking toward the park exit, toward the parking lot where she'd left the new car she'd bought 3 days earlier, with money withdrawn from the joint account on the lawyer's advice. Mike took a step to follow her. "I'm coming with you. It's my kid too." Sarah stopped, turned slowly. Her face was a landscape of irrevocable decisions. "Dr. James Harlan, my lawyer, will contact yours, discuss visitation terms." "Until then," she paused, ensuring every word was understood, "you don't set foot in the same room as me or my son." "You can't do this!" Mike's voice was a shout now, full of desperation and disbelief. "It's already done," she replied simply. And then she turned her back and kept walking. Didn't look back, didn't hear the pleas turning to anger, nor the sound of Victoria's collapse on the park bench. She walked, contraction after contraction, toward her car, toward the hospital, toward her son, toward the rest of her life. The pain was real, sharp, rhythmic, but it was a clean pain. A pain with purpose. Different from the treacherous pain of betrayal, this pain would lead her somewhere that was only hers. Arriving at the car, she rested her forehead on the steering wheel for a moment, breathing deeply as another contraction hit her. Stronger, closer. Then she started the car and drove to the hospital, alone, as she would always be from that moment on. And for the first time since the car broke down in front of that hotel, that thought didn't scare her. It strengthened her. The car felt like a bubble of distorted reality. Each contraction was a tide of molten iron enveloping her body, starting in her back and tightening in a band over the stretched skin of her belly. Sarah kept her hands firm on the wheel, knuckles white. The panting breath, learned in birthing classes, was the only sound inside the vehicle besides the soft engine hum. She wasn't crying, wasn't screaming. She focused on breaking the drive into manageable segments. To the next traffic light, to the next turn, to the next breath. The phone on the passenger seat vibrated. Mike. Then an unknown number, probably Victoria. Then Mike's mother. She ignored. The outside world, with its dramas and demands, had ceased to exist. There was only the road, the pain and the destination. She parked in the maternity lot with a surreal sense of detachment, got out of the car, legs trembling, and walked to the emergency entrance, stopping halfway to lean on a pole, eyes closed, as another contraction stronger dominated her. The pain was a living, ravenous animal gnawing at her insides. Inside the maternity ward, the white light and antiseptic smell were a shock. The nurse at reception looked at her belly, at her contained expression. "Mrs. Sarah, we were expecting you." "The contractions, they're 4 minutes apart," she managed to say, voice tense. As they wheeled her to the pre-labor room, her phone rang again. It was Jessica. Sarah answered. "Mom, where are you? Dad called me desperate, said you're having the baby. Is it true?" "I'm at the maternity ward, love," said Sarah, her voice faltering for a moment as a new wave of pain hit. "Yes. It's on the way. I'm coming right now, don't worry." She barely hung up. The phone rang again. Dr. Harlan, the lawyer. "Mrs. Sarah, I got a very agitated call from your husband. He claims you're preventing him from witnessing the birth of his child. He's on his way to the hospital intending to demand his parental rights." The cold legal reality invaded her fragile refuge. Another contraction, more intense. She gritted her teeth. "He can't do anything before the baby is born?" she asked, gasping. "Legally, no. Labor is the mother's medical procedure, but as soon as the child is born, he has rights. I recommend informing the medical team that you do not want his presence in the delivery room. They are obligated to comply." She did exactly that as soon as they put her in the room while changing into a hospital gown. The midwife, a middle-aged woman with calm eyes, noted the information with a grave nod. "It's done, dear. Here, you're in command. No one enters without your authorization." The room's solitude was both terrifying and empowering. The contractions intensified, getting closer. The pain was a separate universe, a primitive place where there was no husband, no lover, no betrayal. Just the hard work of bringing a life into the world. She paced the room, stopping to grip the table or bed when the pain peaked, breathing with fierce focus. The door opened. It was Jessica. Face pale, eyes still marked by crying, but now full of new determination. "Mum," she said, crossing the room and taking Sarah's hand. She clung to her daughter's hand like a lifeline. For an hour, it was just the two of them, mother and daughter, against the inexorable tide of labor. Jessica spoke softly, encouraging, wiping her mother's forehead with a cool cloth. Then, the inevitable happened. The door opened again. Mike was there, standing in the hallway. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. His expression was a mix of genuine concern, desperation, and a spark of wounded entitlement. "Sarah," His voice came out hoarse. "Please, let me in. It's my kid too." Sarah, at the peak of a contraction, turned her face to the wall, shaking her head in denial. "Out," the midwife ordered, positioning herself firmly at the door. "The patient has not authorized your presence. I'm the father, and I'm the professional responsible for ensuring the mother has a safe, stress-free delivery. Out, or I'll call security." Mike stood there for a moment, shoulders slumped, looking at Sarah, who wouldn't meet his eyes. The humiliation and impotence on his face were almost palpable. He backed away and the door closed. From then on, labor accelerated. The pain became a single, continuous entity. The voices around her, the midwife, the nurse, Jessica, seemed to come from far away. The world reduced to a primal impulse. Push. "It's time, Sarah," said the doctor, who had entered silently. "On the next contraction, I want you to push." The effort was titanic. A tremor ran through her entire body. Every muscle, every fiber, focused on that single goal. There was no room for thought, only action. The sound that came from her was guttural, a low roar of pure, vital force. And then suddenly the unbearable pressure eased, followed by a brief, electrifying silence, broken by a strong, vigorous cry. "It's a boy, Sarah," said the doctor, lifting the baby, red and wrinkled, still connected to her by the cord. He placed the newborn on her chest. His warmth was overwhelming, the weight, tiny and perfect. She looked at that swollen face, the clenched little hands, and a wave of love so brutal and absolute that it hurt, swept away all the pain, all the fatigue, all the betrayal. The tears finally came. Silent, hot, washing not the pain, but the soul. It was in that moment of absolute purity, with her son on her chest and her daughter by her side, that the room door burst open violently. It wasn't Mike. It was Victoria. Her face was disfigured by fury and desperation. The elegance had completely evaporated. "He ruined me," she shouted, ignoring the intimate scene, pointing an accusing finger at Sarah. "Mike, because of you. He said it was a mistake, that he destroyed his family for nothing. And you with your saintly pose with your baby, you got everything." The midwife and a nurse tried to grab her, but Victoria dodged. "You think you won?" She spat the words, her eyes wild. "There's something you don't know, you old hag. Something that will destroy you too." Sarah, exhausted, enveloped in a post-birth halo of love, stared at Victoria, not with hate, but with deep, deep pity. "Nothing you can say will destroy me now, Victoria," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse but firm, arms protecting the baby. "Get out of here. You don't matter anymore." Security arrived, 2 uniformed men who firmly grabbed Victoria by the arms. She struggled, screaming as she was dragged out of the room. "Ask him. Ask Mike about the 200,000. Ask where the money from Jessica's college fund is. Ask." The door closed, muffling her screams. Silence returned to the room, heavy and charged. The baby whimpered softly on Sarah's chest. Jessica stood frozen, her face pale as marble. She looked at her mother, eyes wide. "Mum," she whispered, "my college fund." Sarah closed her eyes. The final bomb wasn't about the affair. It was about something much, much worse, and Victoria, in her final downfall, had launched it into the center of that room, poisoning the purest moment of her life. The exhaustion was total, the pain, now a throbbing residual ache. But the new mystery, the new stab, hung in the air, promising the war was far from over. She pressed her son to her chest. The battle for her daughter's money had just begun. The silence in the room was heavy as lead. The baby's soft cry on Sarah's chest seemed the only real sound in the world. Victoria's accusation echoed off the white walls, poisoning the air. Jessica's college fund. Sarah opened her eyes. The exhaustion was an anchor pulling her into the abyss, but a new clarity, fierce and protective, ignited in her. She looked at Jessica, whose face was a mask of incredulity and renewed betrayal. "Jessica," Sarah's voice came out hoarse but firm. "Go to the door and tell security no one else enters here. No one. Then turn off your phone and mine." Jessica, moving like an automaton, obeyed. The click of the door closing and the electronic silence of the phones being turned off created a temporary, armed bubble of peace. As the nurse helped clean the baby and finish post-birth procedures, Sarah's mind worked with a coldness that surprised her. The investment fund for Jessica's college had been set up with half of an inheritance Sarah herself had received from her parents. Mike was the manager. He always said it was performing well, safe. As soon as she was alone with Jessica and the baby, whom, looking at his wrinkled little face, she mentally called Benjamin, she picked up the hospital phone and called Dr. Harlan. "It's Sarah. The baby is born. It's a boy. And I need you to listen." Without emotion, she reported Victoria's accusation. "I need you to check my daughter Jessica's investment fund immediately and freeze any remaining assets of Mike's you can." The lawyer's response came hours later, late in the day, when Sarah had been transferred to a private room. Dr. Harlan's voice was grave over the phone. "Mrs. Sarah, I checked. The fund was emptied 3 months ago. The amount of $200,000 was transferred to a shell account and then vanished. The transactions were made by Mike." Sarah looked at Jessica, who was holding her sleeping brother. She saw her daughter's face slowly crumble. There were no more tears, just a deep emptiness. "He paid the down payment on an apartment for Victoria," Jessica whispered, her voice flat. "Alex's mom. He used my future to buy an apartment for his lover." It was the final blow. More than the betrayal, more than the humiliation, stealing her daughter's future was definitive proof of Mike's moral ruin. The next morning, Sarah woke with the decision made. While nursing Benjamin, she dictated a message to Dr. Harlan, authorizing him to pursue all possible actions: divorce on grounds of spouse's fault, recovery of the $200,000, asset seizure request. Mike tried visiting her countless times, sent flowers, letters. She refused everything. The nurse was her sentinel. The only message she accepted to hear through the lawyer was his unconditional surrender. He accepted all divorce terms. The house was hers. The alimony she demanded was his to pay. He wouldn't fight for custody, only request supervised visits. He was a broken man, professionally and financially ruined, his reputation reduced to dust. The passion for Victoria had evaporated under the scorching sun of scandal and consequences. Victoria was found, days later, in the new apartment. An overdose of pills. It was a cry of desperation that took her to a recovery clinic. Her name became synonymous with shame. Alex cut all ties with his mother, and after a period of pain and anger, grew closer to Jessica, united by the same wound. 6 months later, Sarah was in the living room of her house, the same one she had almost lost. Afternoon light streamed through the window, illuminating Benjamin, who played on a mat on the floor. He was a calm baby, with an easy laugh. Jessica was at university. The process to recover the stolen funds was underway, slow but progressing. Mike lived in a rented apartment, and his bi-weekly visits to Benjamin were supervised and full of silent sadness. Sarah looked around. The house had a new energy. Mike's belongings were gone. The photos of them together were stored away. There were law books scattered on the coffee table. She had decided to resume her career, specialize in family law. The ferocity with which she would protect other women from her fate was a fire warming her from within. The peace she felt wasn't the peace of absence of war. It was the peace of hard-won victory. It was the peace of knowing that when everything collapsed, she hadn't let herself be buried by the rubble. She had dug with her nails until she saw the sky again. Benjamin let out a gurgle, reaching for a colorful rattle. Sarah smiled, a calm smile that reached her eyes. The phone vibrated. It was a message from Jessica. "Mom, I passed the civil law test, and Alex is coming to dinner tonight, okay?" Sarah typed a response. "Perfect. I'm proud of you, and he's always welcome." She set the phone aside and lifted Benjamin, smelling his sweet baby scent. He grabbed her finger with his tiny hand with surprising strength. Life wasn't fair. She had learned that in the cruelest way. But life went on. And she, Sarah, pregnant and betrayed on the sidewalk of a hotel, hadn't broken. She had awakened, and awakened stronger, wiser, and finally owner of herself. The past was a scar, the future, an open field, and she was ready to walk. What did you think of this story? From 0 to 10, what rating would you give it? Subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell to receive all our stories, and take the opportunity to watch another amazing story by clicking on the screen. Thank you, and see you next time.
Luke Carter, a 38-year-old architect, was the kind of man who found comfort in precision. Known for his innovative designs and meticulous attention to detail, his work had earned him accolades and respect in his field. But while his career soared, his personal life remained strictly compartmentalized, untouched by the chaos of emotions and relationships. Luke's office, perched high in a downtown skyscraper, was a reflection of his personality, sleek, modern, and devoid of clutter. As he reviewed blueprints for his latest project, the intercom buzzed, breaking his concentration. "Mr. Carter," Kelly, his assistant, said hesitantly, "there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she insists it's urgent." Luke frowned, annoyed by the interruption. "You know my policy on unannounced visitors, Kelly." "I do, sir," she replied, her tone uneasy. "But she says her name is Julia Reyes, and it's personal." The name struck a faint chord in Luke's memory, but he couldn't place it. After a pause, he relented. "Fine. Give me 5 minutes, then send her in." Luke returned to his blueprints, brushing off the intrusion as a temporary inconvenience. Little did he know, his life was about to be upended in ways he could never have predicted. When the office door opened, Luke didn't look up immediately. Maintaining control in unexpected situations was second nature to him, and he had no intention of giving this Julia Reyes the upper hand. "Mr. Carter," a woman's voice said, steady but tinged with tension, "thank you for seeing me." Luke finally raised his eyes and froze. Julia Reyes stood before him, looking both familiar and unfamiliar. Her dark hair was shorter than he remembered, her face sharper, more serious. But there was no mistaking her. 7 years ago, their paths had crossed briefly, fleetingly, during a conference in Chicago. "Julia," he said neutrally, leaning back in his chair, "this is unexpected." "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't absolutely necessary," she replied, still standing, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Then you'd better tell me why you're here." Julia hesitated, then took a deep breath. "That night we spent together in Chicago, I got pregnant." The words hit Luke like a blow, though he kept his face impassive. "I see," he said carefully, though his mind raced. Julia's voice cracked slightly as she continued. "I have a daughter. Her name is Luna, and she's 6 years old. And I need your help." Luke's grip on the edge of his desk tightened. "Help with what, exactly?" "I need you to take her," Julia said, her composure slipping. "I've lost everything, my job, my savings, my home. I can barely provide for myself, let alone for her." Luke stared at her, his mind calculating scenarios, implications, outcomes. But beneath the logical noise, a faint, unfamiliar feeling began to stir. Luke Carter prided himself on his ability to stay grounded, no matter how chaotic the situation. But as Julia handed him a folder containing documents, including a birth certificate with his name listed under father, that calm exterior began to crack. "I have everything ready for a DNA test," Julia said, her voice steady but layered with urgency. "You can choose the lab, the doctor, anything to put your mind at ease." Luke nodded curtly. "I'll handle it." Though he kept his tone neutral, doubt gnawed at him. He needed more than her words. He needed proof, the kind that couldn't be refuted. The next morning, Luke arranged for the test at a clinic of his choosing, keeping Julia informed. He told himself it was just another problem to solve, but the wait for results proved excruciating. Days passed, and Luke found himself replaying fragments of that night in Chicago. Could it be true? The results arrived on a Thursday morning. Luke stared at the email, his heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt in years. 99.99% probability of paternity. The conclusion was inescapable. Luna was his daughter. Later that evening, Julia brought Luna to his penthouse. When the elevator doors opened, Luke found himself face to face with a little girl who looked unnervingly familiar. Luna stood holding Julia's hand, her dark curls framing a curious face that mirrored his own in more ways than he cared to admit. "Hi," Luna said softly, her voice steady despite her shyness. "Hi, Luna," Luke replied, his voice gentler than he expected. He hesitated. "I'm Luke." "You're my dad," Luna stated, more as a fact than a question. Luke glanced at Julia, who nodded slightly, her eyes filled with cautious hope. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. Inside, Luna's wide eyes wandered over the minimalist furniture and towering windows. "Your house is really big," she said. "Thank you," Luke said awkwardly. "Would you like something to drink? I have juice." "Apple juice?" she asked, perking up. "Yes, apple juice." He went to the kitchen, giving himself a moment to breathe. When he returned with a juice box, Luna smiled brightly. "Thank you, Dad," she said, the word catching him off guard. Luke's throat tightened, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through him. For the first time, he realized this wasn't just about logistics or DNA. It was about a little girl who had no idea how much she was about to change his life. The following week was unlike anything Luke Carter had ever experienced. Julia, desperate for stability, asked him to take care of Luna temporarily while she looked for a new job and a permanent home. "I'll only need a week," she promised, "just until I get back on my feet." Luke hesitated. He was a man who thrived on control, on knowing the outcome of every decision. Taking care of a 6-year-old was entirely uncharted territory. But when he looked at Luna, wide-eyed and hopeful, he couldn't say no. "Fine," he said finally. 1 week. The first morning was a disaster. Luke had no idea how to pack a school lunch or braid hair. Luna's questions came rapid fire. "Where's my backpack? Do I need my library book? Can we have pancakes for breakfast?" By the time he dropped her off at school, he was already exhausted. But as the days passed, Luke began to adjust. He learned Luna's favorite foods, her bedtime routine, and how to read her moods. She was bright and curious, asking endless questions about his work. One evening, she stood beside him at his drafting table, watching as he sketched a design. "Can I try?" she asked, holding out her hand for a pencil. Luke hesitated but handed it to her. Luna began drawing confidently, creating what she proudly declared was a house for unicorns. Luke couldn't help but smile. But the turning point came midweek when Luna had a severe asthma attack. It started with a small wheeze, but within minutes, she was struggling to breathe. Panicked, Luke called Julia, who immediately instructed him to take Luna to the emergency room. At the hospital, Julia arrived just as the doctors began treatment. Luke stood helplessly by, his usual calm shattered. Watching Luna struggle was unbearable. "She'll be okay," Julia reassured him, though her own hands trembled. Hours later, as Luna slept soundly in her hospital bed, Luke sat beside her, his head in his hands. Guilt weighed heavily on him, intertwining with the growing resolve. "I should have known," he murmured, his voice thick with regret. Julia placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "It was in the medical records," she said, her voice soft but strained. "Her asthma's been under control for years. I didn't think—" She broke off, taking a shaky breath. Luke looked at her, then at Luna. "I can't keep doing this halfway. If I'm going to be in her life, I need to be all in." From that moment on, something shifted in Luke. He rearranged his work schedule to attend Luna's school events and started picking her up from school. He even learned to braid her hair, though his first few attempts were laughably uneven. For the first time in his life, Luke Carter's world wasn't defined by blueprints or deadlines. It was defined by the laughter of a little girl who was slowly teaching him what it meant to truly care for someone else. But just as Luke was beginning to find his rhythm as a father, the outside world intruded in a way he hadn't prepared for. The balance he'd carefully constructed began to tilt when an unexpected phone call shattered their peace. Luke's decision to fully embrace fatherhood marked a new chapter for him and for Julia, Though their relationship was still cautious, they began working together to provide Luna with the stability she deserved. The first major step was housing. Luke insisted on helping Julia find a permanent place to live. "I found an apartment close to her school," Luke said one evening, showing Julia the listing. "It's in a secure building and it has enough space for both of you." Julia hesitated, her pride warring with her need for stability. "I appreciate this, Luke, but I can't let you pay for everything. I need to do this on my own. You can pay rent once you're back on your feet," Luke offered, his tone firm but understanding. "This isn't about us, Julia. It's about Luna." Reluctantly, Julia agreed, and within days she and Luna were settling into their new home. Seeing her daughter excitedly decorate her new bedroom brought tears to Julia's eyes. Meanwhile, Luke and Julia began to navigate co-parenting. They attended Luna's school events together, worked out shared routines, and even spent time as a family on weekends. One Saturday, they took Luna to the park, where she delighted in showing off her gymnastics moves. "Watch this, Dad," Luna called, attempting a wobbly cartwheel. Luke applauded, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "You're amazing, kiddo." Later, as they sat on a picnic blanket, Luna looked up at her parents. "It's nice when we're all together," she said simply. Julia glanced at Luke, their eyes meeting for a brief moment. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared desire to give Luna the life she deserved. But the closeness also reignited old feelings. One evening, after putting Luna to bed, Luke and Julia found themselves lingering in the living room. "You've changed," Julia said softly. "So have you," Luke replied, his voice steady. They didn't say more, but the air between them felt charged, filled with possibilities they weren't quite ready to name. As the weeks turned into months, their bond deepened, not just as co-parents, but as two people rediscovering each other. Slowly, tentatively, they began to wonder if this unexpected journey could lead to more than just rebuilding their family. Just as Luke was settling into his new life as a father, an unexpected challenge threatened to unravel everything. Early one morning, Julia called Luke, her voice tense. "Have you seen the news?" "No," Luke replied, frowning as he opened his laptop. The headline hit him like a punch. "Renowned architect's hidden family, Luke Carter's secret daughter and former flame revealed." The article was filled with photos of him, Julia, and Luna at the park, accompanied by invasive speculation about their relationship and how it might affect Luke's career. By the time he arrived at his office, the fallout had already begun. His partners and clients were calling non-stop, questioning his judgment. During a tense meeting, one partner confronted him. "Luke, this is damaging our reputation. Investors are worried. You need to address this." Luke's jaw tightened. "I'll handle the media, but my daughter and her privacy are off limits. Do you understand me?" That evening, Luke found Julia pacing in her living room. Luna was in her room, thankfully unaware of the chaos outside. "This is why I didn't tell you before," Julia said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want her dragged into your world." "She's my world now," Luke replied firmly, "and I'll protect her, no matter what it takes." The media frenzy forced Luke to make a choice he had long avoided. After days of reflection and heated meetings, he called his partners together. "I'm stepping back," Luke announced, his voice calm but resolute. "I'll remain involved in strategic planning, but the day-to-day operations need a new lead." His colleagues were stunned. "Luke, are you sure about this?" one asked. "Yes," he replied firmly. "My priorities have changed. It's time I focus on what matters most." With the transition in motion, Luke turned his attention back to Julia and Luna. On the evening of Luna's school play, he and Julia sat side by side in the front row, their hands brushing as they clapped for Luna's performance. "You're smiling," Julia teased softly. "It's hard not to," Luke admitted, watching Luna beam on stage. After the play, as Luna ran off to celebrate with her friends, Luke led Julia to a quieter corner of the auditorium. "Julia," Luke said, his voice low but unwavering as he took her hands. "I've spent my entire career creating spaces that people call home. But the truth is, I didn't know what home really meant until now. You and Luna have shown me something I never thought I needed." You've changed everything." Tears glistened in Julia's eyes as Luke dropped to one knee. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Julia laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said, pulling him up into an embrace. Their wedding was small, intimate, and perfect. Luna proudly stood as their flower girl, scattering petals with dramatic flair. As Luke and Julia exchanged vows, they promised not only to love each other, but also to create a home filled with warmth, trust, and laughter for Luna. In the end, Luke realized his greatest achievement wasn't the career he had built, it was the family he had found. As he stood with Julia and Luna, surrounded by love and laughter, he knew this was only the beginning of their story, a story of second chances, growth, and the power of connection. If this heartfelt journey moved you as much as it moved us, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We bring you more stories like this, filled with emotion, inspiration, and the beauty of life's unexpected turns. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss an update. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Luke's story resonated with you the most? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.
My husband is a doctor. Day and night, he sat vigil by the bedside of his mistress's mother, feeding her and attending to her every need. I didn't cause a scene. I walked away in silence with the divorce papers in hand. 1 month later, when he brought his mistress to what he believed was still our home, the scene he found made him turn pale and scream in despair. The hallway of the executive wing at Metropolitan University Hospital always smelled faintly of eucalyptus essential oil, a pleasant scent that contrasted sharply with the harsh antiseptic odor of the regular floors. I hid behind a marble column, my heart as cold as stone. From Suite 703, I could hear the soft, loving voice of my husband, Jake. "Come on, sweetie, just a little more. I specifically asked the kitchen to make this broth extra smooth, just how you like it." A woman's fawning voice responded. It must have been the young nurse, Sophia, Jake's mistress. "My mother is so lucky to have you. What a blessing that someone as competent and caring as Jake is looking after you. Oh, my daughter has sharp eyes, all right. What a catch she found." This was the weak yet satisfied voice of Mrs. Davis, Sophia's mother. I tightly gripped the cell phone in my hand. The message from Ethan, Jake's younger brother, still glowed on the screen, sent an hour ago from a decrepit county general in rural upstate New York. "Claire, I think Mom isn't doing well at all. The doctor says we need to transfer her to a bigger hospital. I've been calling Jake all morning, but he won't answer. He must be in emergency surgery, right, sis?" Surgery. Yes, a genuine theatrical production. His surgery was unfolding in this very luxurious suite, his hands meticulously tending to his mistress's mother, while his own mother struggled against pain in a forgotten rural hospital. I began to suspect things a long time ago. Jake started coming home late, the urgent consult calls and nighttime surgeries became more frequent. He was a gifted surgeon, the pride of the hospital, so his excuses always seemed plausible. But the intuition of a wife of 10 years is never wrong, especially after I accidentally found a receipt for a luxury fruit basket in the pocket of his white coat, delivered precisely to this room, 703. And now, here I was, seeing with my own eyes Jake, dressed in the pale blue shirt I had ironed for him, his sleeves neatly rolled up, carefully peeling a crisp red apple. Sophia sat beside him, her head resting coquettishly on his shoulder. Mrs. Davis, propped up in bed, watched them with a look of perfect contentment. A picture of the perfect family, so perfect it was nauseating. I inhaled deeply, trying to suppress the tremor rising from my chest. Pain, betrayal, contempt, a toxic cocktail of emotions that choked me. There was a time I would have burst into that room, screaming, shattering their hypocritical scene. I would have slapped that woman and ripped the mask off my damn husband. But not now. I watched them through the crack in the door. The way Jake looked at Sophia, his smile wasn't forced. He was enjoying this farce. Jake's career, his reputation, that was what he valued most. A scandal involving adultery and abandoning his elderly mother would be a death blow at this hospital, especially just as he was about to be promoted to deputy chief of staff. An intelligent woman does not seek revenge through violence. Only those with nothing to lose do that. I still had much to lose: my honor, my family's standing, and most importantly, the opportunity to reclaim everything. I turned on my heel and walked away silently. The happy laughter from Suite 703 faded behind me. I wasn't going to make a scene. I would let them enjoy their final moments of bliss. Because the real performance was about to begin, and I was the director. Instead of causing a scandal, I chose a more discreet corner at the end of the hall, a place from which I could observe the door of 703 unseen. What I needed was evidence, not a pointless argument. Tears solve nothing. Only logic and meticulous preparation would help me in this battle. I turned on my phone camera and set it to zoom. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from rage. I had to take several deep breaths to steady my aim. About 15 minutes later, the room door opened. Sophia stepped out first, gripping Jake's arm. They whispered something, and she stood on tiptoes to give him a fleeting kiss on the cheek, a kiss of thanks, a kiss of victory. I pressed the shutter. The photos of Jake's profile and Sophia's satisfied smile came out crystal clear. They didn't leave immediately. They stood by the door while Jake gave a few final instructions to a nurse, and Sophia mentioned she was going to discard a small trash bag. Jake waited. I knew this was my chance. Calmly, I emerged from my hiding spot and walked toward the elevators. As I passed him, I accidentally dropped my purse. Several lipsticks and a small mirror rolled across the floor. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I murmured, just loud enough for him to hear. Jake turned, startled. When our eyes met, I saw a flash of panic, but he masked it quickly. He was an excellent actor. "Claire, what are you doing here?" He bent down to pick up my items. His voice sounded slightly strained. "I came to visit an acquaintance. Didn't you say you had surgery all day?" I looked him straight in the eye. My voice was chillingly calm. "Ah, the operation finished early. I just dropped by to check on a patient before heading out." Jake was clearly nervous. He wasn't used to lying to me so clumsily. "Ah, yes. The patient in this room?" I asked, pointing to 703. "You seem awfully concerned about them. Is it a colleague's family member?" Just then, Sophia returned. Seeing me, her pretty face instantly contorted. She recognized me as Dr. Jake Anderson's wife, whom she had seen several times at the hospital Christmas party. Jake was frozen between the two of us. The air grew thick. I smiled a perfect social smile. I accepted the purse from his hands. "Well, I won't interrupt you with your patient any longer. I'm leaving now. Don't be late for dinner." I didn't give them time to say anything else and turned away. Even inside the elevator, I felt Jake's gaze fixed on my back. He was scared, but I wasn't finished yet. I didn't go to the parking garage. I went to the ground floor and walked out into the hospital garden. I sat on a bench and turned on my phone. I didn't review the photos I'd just taken. I opened the audio file I had discreetly started recording when I began the conversation with Jake. His nervous voice, his clumsy lies, his guilty silence when Sophia appeared, everything was recorded. I calmly saved the file and renamed it Judgment Day. Then I searched my contacts for Mr. Harrison's number. I called, and he answered almost instantly. "Mrs. Anderson, how can I help you?" Mr. Harrison's voice was always clear and professional. He was my family's longtime attorney. "Mr. Harrison, I need your help," I said, taking a deep breath. "I want you to draft a divorce settlement, and I need a consultation right now. I have evidence. I want him to walk away with nothing." "Understood," Mr. Harrison said without asking further questions. "Can you be at my office in an hour? I'll wait for you." "Thank you. I'm on my way." I hung up and turned off the phone. The earlier rage had completely dissipated. In my chest, only a feeling of icy emptiness and steely determination remained. "Jake, you chose this path. Don't blame me for being cruel. 10 years of marriage, 10 years caring for this home, repaid with betrayal. You will pay for it, and the price will be very, very high." Mr. Harrison's office was on the 20th floor of a prime office building downtown. The space, quiet and luxurious, commanded an almost suffocating solemnity. I sat across from him and placed my phone on the table. "This is everything I have," I said calmly. Photos of him and his mistress caring for her mother in a VIP suite. The recording of our conversation in the hospital hallway, where he admits to lying about a surgery, and messages from his brother confirming that his own mother is gravely ill in a rural hospital and he has completely abandoned her. Mr. Harrison meticulously examined each piece of evidence. He wore glasses, and his face revealed no emotion. He was a competent attorney, and most importantly, someone I could trust. "The evidence is quite clear, Mrs. Anderson," he said, looking up and removing his glasses. "Emotionally, he has severely violated marital trust. Caring for his mistress's mother while abandoning his own is a fatal moral weakness." "I'm not interested in his morality," I interrupted. "I want to know what the law says. I want to leave him with nothing. As they say, love is one thing, but business is business." Mr. Harrison frowned slightly at my harshness. He adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Anderson, you must understand that legally, marital assets acquired during the marriage are typically split 50 divided by 50 inches a divorce, unless you can prove that all wealth was generated by you or that he contributed nothing. His prestigious reputation as a doctor counts as a contribution." I scoffed. "Let me clarify. The suburban estate we live in was purchased with money my parents gave me as a wedding gift. It's documented as a separate asset. The pharmaceutical company I run is my family's legacy. Jake is just a salaried doctor. Yes, his salary is high, but the approximately $350,000 we have in joint savings is in a shared account. Then we can focus on that $350,000 and the car," Mr. Harrison noted. "As for the estate, if we have the documents proving it's a separate premarital asset, he won't be entitled to anything. But the Tesla Model S he drives, and that $350,000 a judge, is very likely to split those equally." "I don't want to split anything," I said firmly. "I want it all. I want him to walk out of my life with only what he earned, not what I gave him." Mr. Harrison paused thoughtfully. He interlaced his fingers. "Then we won't take this matter to court, at least not yet." I waited for him to continue. "We'll use a different strategy," he said slowly. "What does your husband value most? His reputation? The deputy chief of staff position he's aspiring to?" "Exactly," Mr. Harrison nodded. "This evidence might not be enough to strip him of all assets in court, but what if this evidence were to accidentally reach the hospital's board of directors, the medical ethics board, or even the hospital's internal forum?" A flash of understanding crossed my mind. I was beginning to grasp his plan. "A prestigious doctor," he continued, "having an affair with a staff nurse, abandoning his own dying mother to care for his mistress's mother. Mrs. Anderson, this isn't just a personal moral failing. It's a scandal that could utterly destroy his career. The hospital will never allow someone like that to represent its image. You are suggesting I threaten him with this?" "I suggest you give him a choice," Mr. Harrison corrected me. "On one hand, the divorce agreement we will draft. It will specify that he voluntarily relinquishes all rights to the estate, the vehicle, and the entire $350,000 in savings. He leaves empty-handed, but in return, you keep silent. This evidence never sees the light of day. On the other hand," Mr. Harrison smiled. It was the cold smile of a seasoned attorney. "His career will collapse in an instant. He won't just lose the money, he'll lose everything." I took a deep breath. This was exactly what I wanted, a direct blow to his pride and his future, not just his wallet. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice completely calm, "draft the harshest agreement possible. Make every clause explicit. The house, the car, the savings, he won't get a dime. And I want it ready tonight." "Are you completely sure, Mrs. Anderson?" "Tonight. Completely." I stood up. "I won't spend another second under the same roof as that man." I returned home at dusk. The estate was silent and cold. I turned on the living room lights. The usual warm yellow glow now felt alien. I didn't prepare dinner. I brewed a pot of chamomile tea, sat on the sofa, and placed the faxed divorce agreement from Mr. Harrison on the coffee table. At 10 p.m., the familiar sound of Jake's Tesla Model S engine resonated outside. He was back, probably after dropping Sophia off and enjoying a pleasant dinner with her, only then remembering he had a wife waiting. The door opened, and Jake walked in. He looked tired. He loosened his tie. "Still awake?" he asked, as if nothing had happened. "I had a very complicated surgery. I'm exhausted. Surgery again. What a blatant lie. I didn't answer. I just watched him in silence. He must have noticed something strange in my gaze because he stopped. He looked at me, then down at the coffee table. "What is this?" he asked, frowning. "Something you should read," I said, my voice glacial. Jake approached, picked up the papers, and the words "divorce settlement agreement" hit his eyes. I watched his face shift from exhaustion to surprise and then to a deathly pallor. He flipped through the pages one by one, his hands shaking as he read. When he reached the asset division section, which read, "Spouse B, Jacob Anderson, voluntarily waives all rights to marital assets, including the suburban estate, the vehicle, and the entirety of the savings," he snapped his head up abruptly. "Are you insane?" he shouted, throwing the papers onto the table. "You've lost your mind. Who do you think you are to demand this? This house. These savings are my blood and sweat." "Your blood and sweat?" I scoffed. It was the smile he hated most. "Or the blood and sweat you shed caring for your mistress's mother?" I continued, my voice sharp and clear. "You told me you were operating, but you were really with her in suite 703. Jake, you are a magnificent actor." Jake's face turned ashen. He took a step back. "You've been following me. I didn't need to. You left the trail yourself." I picked up my phone, opened the hospital photos, and showed them to him. "What a happy family, right? You tenderly peeling an apple, her leaning on your shoulder. What a shame your real mother, struggling in a rural hospital, doesn't know her dear son is so busy being a good son-in-law to someone else." Jake stared at the screen, speechless. He stammered, "Claire, I can explain. She's just a colleague." "A colleague?" I stood up and faced him. "A colleague you care for while abandoning your dying mother and lying to your wife? Do you take me for a fool? What do you want?" he shouted, trying to regain his composure. "What's the point of making a scene? Divorce, fine, but assets are split. This house is marital property. You still don't understand?" I pointed back to the agreement. "You sign this, you walk away voluntarily and empty-handed, and I keep silent. This marriage ends discreetly." "And if I don't?" Jake challenged me. "If you don't," I smiled, "tomorrow morning, all these photos, the recording of our conversation at the hospital, your brother's messages, everything will be on Dr. Sterling's desk. It will be presented to the hospital's medical ethics board, and I wonder how lively the doctor's internal forum will be when they find out that brilliant Dr. Jacob Anderson is an adulterer and a terrible son." I stared him directly in the eyes. "That deputy chief of staff position you aspire to? Do you think it will still be yours? Furthermore, do you think they'll allow you to keep wearing that white coat?" Every word I spoke was a knife stabbing directly into Jake's pride and greatest fear. He looked at me, his eyes full of rage, but also absolute terror. He knew I wasn't joking. He knew I had connections. My father and Dr. Sterling were longtime friends. Jake remained motionless for a while. The air in the room was stifling. Finally he exhaled, as if all his energy had drained away. "The pen," he said hoarsely. I placed a pen on the papers. Jake took it. His hand trembled as he signed his name on every page of the agreement. The scratching of the pen on the paper sounded like the tearing apart of our 10-year marriage. When he finished, he threw the pen onto the table. "Satisfied?" He looked at me with empty eyes. "Very." I collected the agreement, checking the signatures. "Now pack your bags and get out of my house. Now, I don't want to see your face for another second." Jake said nothing. He stumbled upstairs. 30 minutes later, he came down with a small suitcase. Without looking at me, he headed straight for the door. When his hand was on the knob, I called him. Jake turned, his expression exhausted. "Your mother is in that hospital upstate," I said. "I think she's very ill. Your brother has been calling you all day. He couldn't find you. You should call him." I saw a flicker of shame cross Jake's face. He nodded, opened the door, and left. The sound of the door closing was dry and definitive. I stood in the enormous living room, clutching the agreement. I had won the first round, but I knew this wasn't over. The next morning, Jake and I met at the courthouse. We arrived very early, just as they opened. We didn't exchange a word. Jake wore sunglasses that hid deep circles under his eyes. Perhaps he hadn't slept, Or perhaps he had sought comfort in his mistress. I didn't care. The uncontested divorce process was quick. We had an agreement perfectly drafted by a lawyer, specifying that Jake voluntarily waived all assets. The judge looked at us with some surprise, especially at the asset division clause, but since we both agreed and there were no disputes, she approved it without delay. When we left the courthouse, I held the divorce decree in my hands, a thin but heavy paper. It officially ended 10 years of my youth, 10 years of love and hate. "The Tesla," I said, my voice devoid of emotion as we stood in the lobby. "According to the agreement, you need to turn it over to me. Where are the keys?" Jake reached into his coat pocket and tossed the keychain onto a nearby stone bench. The sound of metal hitting stone was jarring. "I'll grab a cab," he said, turning to leave. His back was straight, but I could sense the contained defeat and rage. "Jake," I called him again. He stopped but didn't turn around. "Did you call your brother? How is your mother?" Jake was silent for a few seconds. "I called. She's the same. The county general said she needed to be moved, but I don't think it's necessary. Good medication is enough. Bringing her here is expensive and a hassle. I'm busy." Busy. He was busy starting his new life with Sophia, and even his own mother had become a hassle. Hearing his reply, the last vestige of compassion, the final trace of spousal affection I might have held, vanished completely. I realized this man was far crueler and more selfish than I had ever imagined. He had not only betrayed his wife but was also a terrible son to the woman who gave him life. "All right, go," I said. Jake disappeared into the morning crowd. I stood there, clutching the divorce papers. I didn't cry. I only felt infinite contempt. Just as I was about to open the car door, my phone rang. It was Mr. Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, good morning." "Mrs. Anderson, good morning. Is everything finalized?" "Yes, it's done. I have the divorce decree in my hands." "Excellent." Mr. Harrison's voice remained calm. "I called to inform you of something. I just sent someone to recheck the status of your ex-mother-in-law at the county general. The situation is not good. The doctor there says she has severe valve insufficiency, and given her age, her status is critical. They suggested an immediate transfer to Metropolitan University Hospital, but the family, specifically Jake, did not consent. He only authorized medication, saying he would schedule something later. He told me he was busy," I responded, gritting my teeth. "Correct. And for your information, he has booked a short trip to Miami Beach with Sophia using a credit card you've already canceled. I assume to celebrate his freedom." A wave of cold fury washed over me. So it wasn't that he didn't have the money, it was that he didn't want to spend it on his own mother. He preferred to spend it on a trip with his mistress than to save his mother's life. "Mrs. Anderson," Mr. Harrison called, noticing my silence. "What do you plan to do?" I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Could you contact Dr. Matthew Sterling at Metropolitan University Hospital? I need to speak with him." "Dr. Sterling?" "Understood. I will schedule an appointment right away." "No," I interrupted. "I don't want an appointment. I want to speak to him now, on his personal line. Tell him that Claire, his friend's daughter, needs his help for an urgent matter of life and death." There were a few seconds of silence. "Understood. Please hold." I stood next to the Tesla, the car that once symbolized Jake's success, and was now mine. I looked at the dense traffic. "Jake, you threw everything away yourself, and I am going to collect everything you scorned, including your mother." "Hello, Claire, my dear." The warm, authoritative voice of Dr. Sterling sounded on the line. Dr. Sterling was my father's best friend, the most prestigious cardiologist in the city, and the current chief of staff at Metropolitan University Hospital. "Yes, doctor. Good morning. I apologize for bothering you so suddenly. Don't worry, child. I trust your father as well. I haven't seen him lately." Dr. Sterling maintained his kind tone. "Yes, my father is fine. Thank you, doctor. Actually, I'm calling you today because I need to ask a very urgent favor." "What's going on? Tell me. Don't stand on ceremony with me." I took a breath and explained the situation concisely. "Doctor, my ex-mother-in-law is in a rural hospital upstate. Her condition is very serious." She has severe valve insufficiency and needs immediate surgery. The doctors there requested a transfer to your hospital, but her son, my ex-husband Jake, did not consent. I heard Dr. Sterling sigh on the other end. He had probably already heard rumors about Jake. The medical circle in the city wasn't that small. Ex-husband? He repeated. Yes, we divorced this morning. I see. It's Jake Anderson. His voice grew serious. And what do you want? I want to bring her here, I said firmly. I want to ask you to assign her the best executive suite, gather the most competent team of specialists for a consultation, and operate on her. I will pay all expenses, down to the last cent. I only have one condition. Tell me. This must be kept in absolute secrecy, I emphasized. I don't want Jake or anyone else to know I'm behind this. Could you send an ambulance from your hospital to the upstate facility to bring her here right now? Invent any excuse. A hospital outreach program, whatever. I just need her brought here safely. Dr. Sterling was silent for a moment. He knew I was putting him on the spot. This was outside all procedure. Claire, he said slowly, sending an ambulance across the state for a patient based on a personal request is very complicated, but I understand your concern. If we leave his mother in the hands of a son like Jake, she might not make it. All right, he decided. Send me her details and the information for the rural hospital. I will personally call the director there and request an emergency transfer under the pretext of a specialized consultation. I will send a competent medical team in the ambulance to pick her up. The vehicle will leave in about 3 hours. Don't worry. Doctor, thank you so much. Tears suddenly welled in my eyes. It was the first time I had cried since discovering Jake's infidelity. It wasn't from pain, but from gratitude. Silly girl, Dr. Sterling chuckled affectionately. Don't cry. Think of it as doing it for your father, my old friend. Now prepare to receive her. I'll assign her executive suite 705 right next to the old 703. I froze. 703? Doctor, how do you know? I'm the chief of staff here. How could I not know what goes on? The whole hospital whispers about how Jake looked after Nurse Sophia's mother in 703. I was going to call him in, but I see you beat me to it. Well done, Claire. A woman should have that kind of backbone. I hung up feeling much lighter. I immediately drove to the hospital and prepaid a considerable sum for Executive Suite 705. I demanded the best service, a dedicated nurse, nutritionist, designed meals, and most importantly, security. I was going to be the dutiful daughter-in-law his mother deserved, a role the man who abandoned his own mother for his mistress could never fill. My ex-mother-in-law, Patricia, was a sweet woman. In the 10 years I was her daughter-in-law, she never raised her voice to me. She deserved much better. And I wasn't doing it just for her. I was doing it for me. This was the first step of my revenge, a plan far more sophisticated than simply taking Jake's money. I was going to make him pay for his indifference and his cruelty. I was going to make him live the rest of his life tormented by grief and regret. At 3 p.m., my ex-mother-in-law, Patricia, arrived at Metropolitan University Hospital. I was already waiting in the lobby. When the ambulance doors opened and I saw the skeletal, pale woman on the gurney, I felt a knot in my stomach. Mom, I approached and took her dry hand. Patricia slightly opened her eyes. Recognizing me, a faint smile formed on her lips. Claire, dear, what are you doing here? I'm so tired. Don't say anything, Mom, I interrupted. It's me. I've brought you to the best hospital. Rest easy. She was taken directly to Executive Suite 705. The room, spacious, bright, and fully equipped, was night and day compared to the rural hospital. Dr. Sterling immediately assembled the best cardiology team to begin a consultation. After the doctors examined her, I entered the room. Patricia was slightly more conscious. Claire, how did all this happen? She asked weakly, holding my hand. The doctor there said I needed to be moved, but Jake said it wasn't necessary. How did you bring me here? This must cost a fortune. I smiled and tucked her blanket around her. Don't worry about that, Mom. Jake has been very busy at the hospital lately and can't keep track of everything. As your daughter-in-law, it's my duty to take over when he can't. My father is friends with the director here, so they gave us a big discount. It's not that much money. I had to lie. I didn't want her to worry. Patricia looked at me with eyes full of gratitude. You are such a good daughter. Jake was so lucky to marry you. I'm sorry, dear. He seems like a different person lately. Don't say another word, Mom. I put a finger to her lips. Now you just need to focus on recovering. We'll talk about other things when you're well. I've hired a caregiver, Mrs. Jenkins. She'll attend to you 24 hours a day. She cooks wonderfully and is very attentive. But the doctor says that in the first phase of treatment, you need absolute rest, and calls or worries could affect your heart. If it's okay with you, I'll hold your phone until you're more stable. Patricia nodded. Yes, dear. I don't have anyone to call now anyway. Only Ethan back home, and he's busy too. You keep it. All right. I pocketed the phone. Now sleep a bit. I'll stay by your side. I wanted her to receive the best treatment in the best conditions without anyone bothering her. That night, I sat by her side and peeled an apple for her, the same fruit, but a completely different atmosphere from Suite 703 the day before. Claire, Patricia suddenly asked, is something going on between you and Jake? My heart clenched, but I smiled. Mom, why do you ask? I just feel it. You aren't the same as you were before. Jake has changed so much, and you, his wife, you're a better child to me than my own son. I feel so bad for you. I placed the apple slice on the plate. Mom, all marriages have their ups and downs. Jake is a brilliant doctor. The work pressure is immense, and sometimes he neglects the family a little. Don't worry about it. Just focus on recovering now. If you get well, I will be happy. Patricia looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. She didn't say anything more, but I knew deep down she understood everything. I stayed with her late into the night and only went home when she was fast asleep. Before leaving, I gave Mrs. Jenkins strict instructions. Mrs. Jenkins, aside from the doctors and me, if anyone comes to visit, call me first. Do not let anyone in, even if they claim to be family. Understood? Perfectly, Mrs. Anderson. I left the hospital and breathed the cool night air. Everything had just begun. Jake, I'm sure you're having a great time in Miami Beach. Enjoy it while you can, because when you return, you will discover that you have not only lost your wife and your assets, but also your mother in a way you can't even imagine. The old estate, filled with 10 years of memories with Jake, now felt cold and too large. Every corner reminded me of him, his lies, his betrayal. I couldn't continue living there. The next day, I called a realtor. I decided to lease the estate. Thanks to its prime location and luxurious interior, it was quickly leased to an expat family for a very high price. The rent would cover Patricia's medical expenses and my new life. At the same time, I used my personal savings, earned at the pharmaceutical company before meeting Jake. I bought a luxury condo in the Hudson Point Tower residential complex. It was a newly constructed high-rise with impeccable security, modern facilities, and most importantly, far enough away from that past. I didn't take much, some clothes, some books, and the only wedding photo I hadn't dared to throw away, not because love remained, but to remind myself of my foolishness over the last 10 years. I tossed it into the deepest drawer of my new closet. My new apartment was on the 30th floor and had a balcony overlooking the river. From here, I could see the city's nightscape, with lights shining like jewels. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood on the balcony, breathing the fresh air. This was the first night I felt truly free. No more long nights waiting for a husband, no more cold dinners, no more suspicion or pain. Meanwhile, across town, Jake and Sophia were also starting their new life. After leaving empty-handed, without a house or car, Jake had to rent an old apartment on the outskirts with the little salary he had left. Of course, he wasn't alone. Sophia moved in with him immediately. She was exultant with her victory. The man she admired, the brilliant doctor, was now all hers. Sophia bragged to her friends that Jake had chosen love over material things. She didn't know, or pretended not to know, that Jake had chosen her because he had no other option. According to the information Mr. Harrison passed on to me, who still had someone monitoring Jake, their life wasn't as idyllic as they imagined. The rented apartment was small and hot. The luxurious Tesla had been replaced by Sophia's beat-up old Honda. Jake, accustomed to me handling everything, now had to do it all himself. They started arguing. If I had exposed them, He wouldn't even have his job right now. They thought that by signing the divorce, everything was over. They thought Jake had lost his assets but saved his reputation and won true love. They were wrong. For me, reclaiming the assets was only the first step. The real war had just begun. I looked at my phone. Almost a month had passed. Dr. Sterling informed me that Patricia's health was recovering very well after the surgery. The wound had healed, her heart was stable, and she could take short walks around the room. I smiled. The time had come. The moment for Jake to know he still had a mother, and the moment for Sophia to know that the price for stealing another woman's husband was far more than living in a small apartment. I called Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison, the time has come for the prodigal son to learn where his mother is. After nearly a month of specialized treatment and care, Patricia had recovered miraculously. From a skeletal, pale, elderly woman on the brink of death, she now had a healthy color. She could walk around the room herself and chatted cheerfully. The heart surgery, performed by Dr. Sterling himself and the best team of specialists, had been a success. Sophia wanted a wedding, recognition, but Jake wasn't in the mood to think about that. He had lost everything and was resentful and irritable. He took out his frustration on Sophia. "Don't you realize I lost everything because of you?" he yelled during one of their fights. "It was because of your ex-wife. You're a coward who didn't dare to fight." Sophia didn't stay quiet. "What do you know? That crazy woman had all the evidence." Jake was starting to feel the pressure of having to pay for everything with his doctor's salary, while Sophia, used to being given everything, demanded more and more. Back in the small, cluttered rental apartment, Jake received a call from his brother Ethan, who was still upstate. "Jake, you're back? I've been trying to call you for weeks." Ethan's voice sounded terrified. Irritated, Jake snapped. "What's all the fuss? I'm exhausted. What is it?" "Mom disappeared, bro." Jake froze. "What? Disappeared? She was at the county general." "That's the strange thing. When I went to visit her, a nurse told me she had been transferred to a bigger hospital. I asked where, and she only said a very nice ambulance from Metropolitan University Hospital came for her. I thought you had organized everything and relaxed. But yesterday I called you, and you said you knew nothing. I rushed back to the county general and asked again. They showed me the transfer papers signed by the director there and Dr. Sterling from Metropolitan, but they said it was a special consultation case, and they didn't have the patient's details. Now I'm at Metropolitan looking for her, but no one knows anything about a patient named Patricia Anderson. Bro, where is Mom?" Jake started to truly panic. He had abandoned his mother, but she was still his mother. If she had really disappeared, he wouldn't know what to tell his relatives. "Calm down. Where are you now?" Jake yelled, but his voice was already trembling. "I'm at the entrance of Metropolitan Hospital. Come right now, please." Jake ignored Sophia, who was yelling questions about what was happening, and grabbed the keys to her Honda. He sped out of the house toward the hospital. This was my plan. I had asked Dr. Sterling not to register Patricia's information in the general system. She was admitted under a different name, in a confidential medical record directly supervised by the Chief of Staff. Only I, Dr. Sterling, and the medical team treating her directly knew. That's why Jake's brother Ethan couldn't find her no matter how hard he searched. And of course it was Mr. Harrison who ensured the news reached Ethan by chance. He had asked an acquaintance at the county general to casually mention to Ethan how indifferent his brother was and that no one knew where their mother had been moved. Jake arrived at the hospital, his face pale. He met Ethan, who was sitting nervously by the entrance. "What happened? Did you find her?" "No, I searched the whole hospital. There is no patient with our mother's name. Everyone says they haven't admitted anyone by that name." Jake started to get angry. He was a doctor here. He had contacts. He went straight to administration and pulled out his medical ID card. "I am Dr. Jacob Anderson from the surgery department. I need to check the information for a 70-year-old patient, Patricia Anderson, transferred from an upstate hospital approximately 1 month ago." The administrator checked the computer and then shook his head. "I'm sorry, Dr. Anderson. There is no patient by that name in the system in the last month." "Look carefully. How can she not be here?" "I was told there is a transfer document signed by Dr. Sterling." Jake slammed the table. "Doctor, please calm down," the administrator said awkwardly. Documents signed by the Chief of Staff are confidential. We do not have access to them. You, from this hospital, know the procedures better than anyone. If you wish, you can go to the Chief of Staff's office and ask directly." Jake froze. He couldn't see Dr. Sterling. Dr. Sterling was my father's friend. With the divorce and recent rumors, he couldn't face him. He stumbled out. He felt helpless. He realized that after leaving me, he had lost all his contacts and his support network. Now he was just an ordinary doctor. "Bro, what now?" Ethan sobbed. "Where could Mom have gone? What if something bad happened to her?" "Shut up," Jake yelled. "I'll think of something." But what could he think of? He started asking his former colleagues, the nurses he knew. But after Sophia had already spread the rumor that Jake had been left by his ex-wife for infidelity, everyone now looked at him with pity, or even contempt. No one wanted to help a fallen man. Jake collapsed onto a hospital bench. For the first time in his life, he felt genuine fear. His mother had disappeared. His career was unstable, and his love life was full of arguments. He had lost everything. Jake and Ethan spent 2 days searching in vain. They even went to the old neighborhood where Jake and I lived to ask if I knew anything, but the estate was locked up tight. They wandered to the corner market, run by Mrs. Perez, a lifelong neighbor who had seen us since Jake and I got married. "Are you looking for Claire?" Mrs. Perez asked, sipping her coffee. "She moved ages ago. I think she leased the house. She lives in the Hudson Point Towers now." "Mrs. Perez," Ethan asked cautiously, "do you know where our mother is now? She's sick and disappeared." Mrs. Perez looked at the two brothers and sighed. "Disappeared? Your mother is living like a queen. I thought you had arranged everything, Jake." Jake was stunned. "What do you mean, Mrs. Perez? Do you know where my mother is?" "Last week, my back was hurting," Mrs. Perez recounted. "Claire drove me to Metropolitan University Hospital. She's a great girl, not like the rumors say. She took care of me from start to finish. When we finished, she told me to wait a moment. She was going to visit her mother-in-law. Since I was curious, I went up to see." Mrs. Perez continued. "Good heavens, your mother, Mrs. Anderson, was in one of the best executive suites. The room was enormous, clean, and she even had a dedicated caregiver. She has a healthy color now and can walk. I chatted with her for a while. She couldn't stop praising what a good daughter-in-law she had. I thought you had arranged it all." Jake and Ethan looked at each other, shocked. "What suite number, Mrs. Perez?" "At Metropolitan, right?" Jake asked hastily, his hands shaking. "Executive 705. On the 7th floor, you'll see it right away. Come on, drink some water and go see her. It's a joy to have a daughter-in-law who cares for her like that." Mrs. Perez didn't notice Jake's expression. Jake, without taking the water, dragged Ethan to the car and drove like a maniac. He couldn't believe it. Claire had done all this. Why? After taking everything from him, why was she doing this to humiliate him? Jake rushed up to the 7th floor. He didn't need to ask for directions. He had worked here. He knew it well. 705. The wooden door was slightly ajar. Jake pushed the door and froze at the scene before him. His mother, Patricia, was sitting in a velvet armchair with a thin wool blanket over her knees. She was watching television, and beside her, the caregiver, Mrs. Jenkins, was carefully arranging a plate of multicolored fruits. Patricia was a different person. She had healthy color and neatly combed hair. She had gained at least 10 pounds since she was at the county general. "Mom," Ethan called softly and then burst into tears, running to hug her. Patricia was startled, but then grew emotional. "Ethan, son, how did you know I was here?" Jake was rooted to the doorway. He looked at his mother, at the room. It was the most expensive executive suite. A single day here cost more than his monthly salary. Everything was top quality. "Jake, you came too?" Patricia called to him, happy to see him. "Come closer. Oh, you look so thin." Jake entered the room as if in a trance. He looked at his mother and couldn't say anything. He had a lump in his throat. He was a doctor and knew how well cared for she was. The surgery scar on her chest, which he assumed was for her heart, was healed. That healthy color was the complexion of a fully recovered person. "Ma'am, who are these two gentlemen?" Mrs. Jenkins stood up, interposing herself between the strangers and Patricia. They are my sons, Patricia introduced them happily. This is my eldest, Jake. He works as a doctor at this hospital. And this is my younger son, Ethan. Mrs. Jenkins said, "Ah," and looked at Jake with a strange expression. It wasn't the look of respect for a doctor, but one of contempt. "Good morning," Mrs. Jenkins said in a cool voice. "Thank you for coming to see your mother." "Mom," Jake finally managed to say, "what are you doing here? Who brought you?" "Claire, who else?" Patricia said proudly. "That girl is an angel. She took care of me ever since I was in that upstate hospital. She hired the best doctor. She got me the best room. She comes to see me every day. She peels apples for me. She chats with me. Look, I'm completely recovered now." Jake felt as if he had been slapped. "Claire, always Claire." Just then, Mrs. Jenkins spoke loudly, as if to ensure Jake heard her. "Your mother is right. I've been working as a caregiver for many years, and I've never met anyone as good as Mrs. Anderson. She cares for her with incredible diligence. She paid hundreds of thousands of dollars of the hospital bill out of her own pocket. Every day she tells me to prepare this and that, all nutritious food. Yet, I haven't seen a hair on your head even once." Mrs. Jenkins didn't mince words. "Mrs. Anderson also warned me," she continued. "She said that after the heart surgery, your mother needed absolute peace, not to be disturbed by anyone. I suppose now that she's better, she allowed you to be notified." Jake stood there, consumed by extreme shame and guilt. He remembered the words he had spoken at the courthouse. "Bringing her here is expensive and a hassle. I'm busy." He had abandoned his mother. His ex-wife, whom he had betrayed, had saved her and given her a new life. This comparison shattered Jake. He was a terrible son, a horrible person. Compared to Claire, he was nothing. "Jake, what's wrong with you? You're so pale," Patricia worried. The image of his mother, healthy and vibrant in the luxurious executive suite, and the scornful gaze of the caregiver repeated in his head over and over. Shame, guilt, and a slight hint of rage. Why had Claire done this? What did she want to prove? That she was a saint and he was trash? He kicked the door open. The apartment was a mess and smelled of last night's takeout. Sophia was sitting on the sofa, legs crossed, a cucumber mask on her face, grooving to music from her headphones. "You're back." She pulled off her headphones, and seeing Jake's thunderous expression, she grew annoyed. "Why the long face? Did you find your mother?" "Yes," Jake replied dryly, throwing the keys onto the table. "Well, there you go. Where is she? Is she all right?" Sophia asked, her voice lacking any real interest as she focused on filing her nails. Jake slumped into a chair, gripping his head. Where to even begin? "Mom is at Metropolitan, in Executive Suite 705. Sophia snapped her head up. "What? A VIP suite? Are you crazy? Where are we going to get the money to pay for that? Are you going to sell my Honda?" "No," Jake said wearily. "Claire did everything." Sophia jumped up, nearly knocking over the nail polish bottle. "What? That woman? Why would she do something like that?" "She paid the hospital bill," Jake said, his voice flat. "Mom says she handled everything, the heart surgery, the dedicated caregiver, the hundreds of thousands of dollars for the bill. She did it all." The air in the room froze. Sophia looked at Jake with a mixture of suspicion and rage. The jealousy she had suppressed for so long erupted. "I knew it," she shouted. "I knew that woman wouldn't do a good deed for free. She has a motive. She wants to use your mother to keep you tied down. She wants to show me that she's rich and noble and I'm nothing." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Jake yelled. "You're defending her?" Sophia glared at him. "You're still defending the ex-wife who threw you out on the street? Jake, are you stupid? Can't you see? She's humiliating you. She's humiliating me. She wants everyone to know you're a terrible son who abandoned his elderly mother, that your ex-wife saved her, and that I'm a homewrecker who doesn't care that her mother-in-law is sick." Sophia's words hit Jake's core. That was exactly what he had felt moments ago, but when Sophia verbalized it, it took on another meaning. He didn't want to admit he felt humiliated. "She saved my mother. You should be grateful," he tried to reason. "Grateful?" Sophia sneered a venomous mockery. "Grateful that she stole your right as a son? Grateful that she made you look like a coward in front of your own mother? How do you think your mother will see you when she recovers? She'll be eternally grateful to her ex-daughter-in-law, and she'll see me as the enemy." Jake froze. He hadn't thought of that. He was only submerged in his guilt. "No." Sophia paced the room. "I won't let her get away with it. You are your mother's son. You have to reclaim your right to care for her. You can't let her do whatever she wants." "Reclaim her? How?" Jake was exhausted. "Who pays the hospital bill? Who pays the caregiver? We don't even have the money for this month's rent." "I don't care." Sophia threw the nail polish bottle onto the table. "That's your problem. You're a doctor. You have contacts. You can't let your mother stay there. You can't let that woman go every day and boast about her generosity. You have to go and tell your mother the truth, that you are taking care of her, that that woman is only paying on your behalf." "Are you crazy? Who would believe that?" "Then bring her home," Sophia ordered. "Bring her here. I'll care for her. I'll show her what kind of daughter-in-law I am. I'll show her that I'm not like that woman who tries to buy affection with money." Jake looked at Sophia, then at the cluttered, small apartment. Bringing Patricia, who just had heart surgery, to this place for Sophia, who couldn't even care for herself, to look after her? He couldn't imagine it. "No." Jake shook his head. "Mom just had surgery. She needs the best conditions, not here." "So you don't trust me?" Sophia screamed, and tears began to stream down her cheeks. "Do you look down on me? Do you think I don't know how to care for anyone? Or are you afraid that if she's here, you won't have an excuse to see your ex-wife again? That you still have feelings for her? For God's sake, what are you talking about?" Jake slammed the table. "Can you just leave me alone?" "No, not until you sort this out once and for all. You have to choose, her or me. If you chose me, you have to be consistent with your choice. You have to go to the hospital and take back your mother. If you don't, we're finished." Sophia issued her ultimatum, ran to her room and slammed the door, leaving Jake alone in the chaos. Love, career, family. He once thought he had everything. Now he had nothing left. He was trapped, not knowing where to turn. The Cold War between Jake and Sophia continued. Jake still had to go to work at the hospital, but his mind couldn't focus. He walked past the 7th-floor hallway and glanced towards 705, but he didn't dare enter. He was afraid to face his mother, afraid of Mrs. Jenkins's gaze. He was also afraid to face me. He was afraid I would look at him with the smile of a victor, seeing him as a loser. He didn't know I was deliberately avoiding that moment. I knew he had come. Mrs. Jenkins had informed me of everything, from Jake's shocked face to Ethan's attitude and Mrs. Jenkins's disapproval. My plan was progressing smoothly. When Jake returned home, the atmosphere was still tense. Sophia hadn't prepared dinner, and the house was even messier. Jake was irritable but didn't know what to do. He was trapped. He couldn't meet Sophia's demand to reclaim his mother because he had no money. Sophia, after a whole day of stewing, felt she couldn't stand idly by. She was a nurse and understood the power of public opinion at the hospital. She knew that if she let me continue to win over Patricia, once Patricia recovered, she would surely praise me and speak ill of Jake. That would directly affect Jake's, and consequently, her own reputation. Sophia was anxious. She had gambled everything to get Jake. She wouldn't let me take him back with just a little money. She had to act. She had to reassert her place. She decided that if Jake wouldn't do it, she would do it herself. She would go to the hospital, not as a nurse, but as the future daughter-in-law visiting her mother-in-law. She would show Patricia that she was now Jake's woman. She would show me that she wouldn't be walked all over. The next morning, Sophia took the day off. She spent the entire morning preparing. She chose the most expensive dress Jake had bought her in Miami Beach, a pure white dress that emphasized her figure. She applied dramatic makeup and curled her hair. She rushed to the market and bought a large, expensive fruit basket, the kind seen in executive suites. She thought she had to make a perfect, glamorous entrance so that neither Patricia nor I could look down on her. She didn't know that this meticulous preparation was just a sign of her own foolishness and insecurity. Around 10 a.m., Sophia, teetering on her heels and carrying the fruit basket, headed for Executive Suite 705. She deliberately walked slowly through the surgery wing area so her fellow nurses would see her. She wanted everyone to know she was in a different position now. Upon reaching the door of 705, instead of knocking, she pushed the door to enter. She imagined herself walking in with a radiant smile, saying, "Good morning, Mrs. Anderson. I'm Sophia, Jake's future wife." But she was immediately stopped. The caregiver, Mrs. Jenkins, stood in the doorway. "Who are you? Who are you looking for?" Mrs. Jenkins' voice was firm and suspicious. She had been very clearly warned by me. Sophia stopped. Her fake smile froze. She didn't expect a caregiver to block her path. "I'm Sophia. I'm here to visit Dr. Jacob Anderson's mother." Sophia tried to regain her confidence, lifting her chin. "Step aside, please." "You're here to visit Mrs. Anderson?" Mrs. Jenkins said, crossing her arms. "I'm sorry, miss. My boss, Mrs. Anderson, has given instructions that anyone wishing to visit must have her permission. Have you called her?" "Claire." Sophia gritted her teeth. "Claire again. What right did she have? She was just the ex-wife." "I am Sophia," she puffed out her chest. "Jake's fiancée. I'm here to visit my future mother-in-law. What does that woman have to do with it?" "Ma'am, are you a caregiver or a guard dog?" "Watch your mouth, miss," Mrs. Jenkins snapped. "I work here. I follow the rules of the person who hired me. Mrs. Anderson pays, so she makes the rules." "Fiancé, you say, Mr. Anderson didn't introduce you yesterday when he and his brother came." From inside, Patricia heard the commotion and asked worriedly, "Mrs. Jenkins, what's going on?" "Nothing, ma'am. Someone just has the wrong room," Mrs. Jenkins called back. Sophia grew even angrier. Being humiliated by a caregiver in the hospital hallway, in plain sight of her colleagues. It was an affront. "I don't care," Sophia forcibly pushed Mrs. Jenkins. "I'm coming in. I'm Sophia, Jake's future wife," she yelled, trying to force her way inside. Mrs. Jenkins blocked her again, and the expensive fruit basket fell to the floor, scattering apples and grapes everywhere. "What is this commotion? What is all this noise?" An authoritative voice resonated. Dr. Sterling appeared at the end of the hall in his white coat. He was accompanied by other doctors on his rounds. Of course, this appearance was no coincidence. I knew Sophia would act. I had asked Dr. Sterling to casually pass through this area at 10 a.m. "Chief of Staff?" Sophia immediately recognized Dr. Sterling and was startled, but still raised her voice. "Chief of Staff, look at this woman. I just wanted to visit Dr. Jacob Anderson's mother, and she won't let me in. She pushed me." Dr. Sterling looked Sophia up and down. His gaze was cold. He had seen all kinds of people and knew perfectly well what this scene meant. "Nurse Sophia from internal medicine, correct?" he said calmly. "This is the executive wing. Absolute silence is required. The patient in suite 705 has just had heart surgery. She cannot be agitated. You are a nurse. You should know better than anyone." "I know, but I'm family," Sophia argued. "Family?" Dr. Sterling frowned. "According to patient Patricia Anderson's medical record, the sole guardian and responsible party is Mrs. Claire Anderson. She has asked the hospital to guarantee the patient's absolute rest." "Who are you to the patient?" "I am Dr. Jacob Anderson's fiancée, her son's fiancée," Sophia shouted, as if this were a magic word. Dr. Sterling scoffed a sneer Sophia would never forget. "Fiancé? We don't work with those titles in this hospital. We work with the law. Mrs. Anderson has the authority. Furthermore, Dr. Sterling lowered his voice. "Are you aware that Dr. Jacob Anderson has been put on administrative leave?" This sentence was like a lightning bolt to Sophia. She was in shock. "What? Administrative leave? Why?" "That is an internal hospital matter. But I advise you, Doctor," Sterling pointed at Sophia, "not to loiter where you don't belong, and to return to your department. Disturbing the hospital order is a serious offense." Dr. Sterling turned to Mrs. Jenkins. "Mrs. Jenkins, continue your work. I have already alerted security. No one not on Mrs. Anderson's list is to enter under any circumstances." "Yes, Chief of Staff." Mrs. Jenkins bowed her head. Dr. Sterling and the doctors left, leaving Sophia alone in the hallway. The glances of her passing colleagues were full of whispers and pointing fingers, some pitying, others delighted. She, so elegantly dressed and made up, now stood amidst a pile of scattered fruit, a pathetic and humiliated figure. Sophia couldn't bear it. She screamed, turned, and ran out of the hallway, trampling the fruit. I was on a nearby staircase, witnessing the entire performance. I smiled. This drama was perfectly executed. And most importantly, the clear, high-definition security camera in the executive wing hallway recorded everything. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison, it's time to secure that video and draft a letter. That very afternoon, I obtained the video from the hospital security camera. I placed this video alongside the previous evidence. The photos of Jake tenderly caring for Sophia's mother in 703, the recording of him lying to me, and Ethan's messages demonstrating that Jake had abandoned his own mother. I had a perfect collection, but I wasn't in a hurry. An effective attack must be surprising and lethal. I didn't want to act myself. I wanted them to crumble from their own actions. I began to draft a letter. To the esteemed members of the Medical Ethics Board and the Board of Directors, I wrote, I am a concerned hospital employee who wishes to remain anonymous. Recently, a series of deeply regrettable events have occurred that seriously affect our hospital's reputation and medical ethics, and I began to tell the tale. It was a chillingly detailed anonymous complaint. I didn't write it in the emotional tone of a betrayed wife. I wrote it in the tone of an outraged medical professional. I began by praising Metropolitan University Hospital's long tradition of medical ethics. Then I laid out my case. I stated that while Dr. Jacob Anderson neglected his duties to care for his mistress's mother, his own mother was gravely ill in a rural hospital, abandoned by him. I presented the messages and the medical record from the County General as evidence. I posed the question, can a doctor who callously abandons his own mother possess the ethics to treat patients? And the final blow. I presented the video from that very morning. I wrote that after Dr. Anderson and Nurse Sophia were discovered by his ex-wife, Nurse Sophia, far from being ashamed, had become even more brazen. That very morning, in the executive wing hallway, she had stormed into suite 705, where the ex-wife was caring for her former mother-in-law, causing a scene and agitating a post-operative heart patient. The complete security camera video recorded everything. I concluded, the unethical actions of Dr. Jacob Anderson and the disruptive behavior of Nurse Sophia are causing enormous outrage among the medical staff. We urge the Board of Directors and the Ethics Board to investigate and deal with them severely to restore professionalism and integrity to our hospital and uphold the honor of the white coat. I reread the letter. It was perfect. Every sentence pointed directly at Jake's weakness, his reputation and his career. I didn't send an email. I printed the letter. I placed all the evidence, the video, the photos, the recording on a USB drive. The next morning, I hired an anonymous courier service to send a package directly to the chairman of the hospital's ethics board, and an identical one to Dr. Sterling's office. Dr. Sterling would know what to do. The storm was coming. Now I just had to wait. 2 days after the anonymous letter was sent, a quiet earthquake shook Metropolitan University Hospital. The letter and the irrefutable evidence on the USB were presented at an emergency meeting of the Board of Directors and the Ethics Board. Dr. Sterling, as Chief of Staff, expressed his extreme anger and disappointment. He ordered that the matter be dealt with severely, with no exceptions. Immediately, Jake was summoned to a disciplinary hearing. He entered the room unaware, but when the chairman of the ethics board placed before him the photos of him with Sophia's mother, played the audio recording, and finally projected the video of Sophia causing a scene in the hallway onto the big screen, Jake's face lost every drop of blood. "How do you explain this, Dr. Anderson?" The chairman's voice was icy. Jake could barely stand. He couldn't explain it. The evidence was undeniable. He stammered, "It's a trap. It's my ex-wife's revenge." "We are not interested in the motive," the chairman interrupted him. "We are interested in the facts. Did you have an affair with Nurse Sophia?" "Yes." "Did you abandon your elderly mother?" "Yes." "Did your mistress cause a scene in the hospital?" "Yes." The board has decided. Dr. Jacob Anderson is suspended without pay for 3 months. Nurse Sophia is also suspended for 1 month and will be transferred to the nutrition department upon her return. Jake staggered, about to collapse. Suspension without pay. His dream of being deputy chief of staff was shattered. The reputation he had built his whole life had crumbled in a single morning. The news spread like wildfire. The entire hospital whispered about Jake and Sophia, brilliant doctor. Jacob Anderson now carried the label of adulterer and terrible son, and the sexy nurse from internal medicine, Sophia, had become a homewrecker. Jake walked out of the hearing like a ghost. He passed through the halls, and the looks from his colleagues were no longer respectful, but contemptuous and pitying. He didn't have the courage to return to his department. He got on Sophia's Honda and rushed home. He needed someone to blame. He kicked open the door to the rental apartment. Sophia was listening to music with her cucumber mask on. "You're back. What's with the face?" "Shut up!" Jake roared like a wounded animal. He rushed over and slapped Sophia with all his strength. The blow sent her rolling off the sofa. "You hit me." "Hit you? I want to kill you." Jake pointed at Sophia, his eyes bloodshot. "This is all your fault. Do you know what you just ruined?" "What did I do?" Sophia started crying. "What did you do? Look at this." Jake threw the suspension notice onto the table. "Because of your stupid game of fiancé, I've been suspended without pay. Are you happy now? You've ruined my entire career." Sophia picked up the paper, read it, and trembled. "Suspended? How is that possible? I only went to visit." "Visit? You call that scandal visiting? Who do you think you are? Do you think you can win against Claire? You're not even fit to tie her shoelaces. You're just stupid." "You dragged me into this," Sophia scoffed. "Now you praise her? You've been suspended because you're useless. That woman hurt you, and now you blame me? Are you even a man?" "No, I'm not a man." Jake smashed a glass against the wall. "I'm an idiot. An idiot for leaving a woman like Claire for someone like you. An idiot for believing in your true love. Did you love me, or my doctor title and my money? Now I have nothing. Why are you still here?" "Jake." Sophia was speechless. "Go. Get out." Jake sat down and gripped his head. "Get out of my house right now. I don't want to see your face again." The love they had once idolized, for which they had risked everything, was now shattered. It collapsed at the first storm because it was built on lies and selfishness. Jake had lost everything: his career, his reputation, and now his love. He was literally left with nothing. "I learned the news from Mr. Harrison." I only smiled. This was not yet over. This was just the appetizer. Jake and Sophia had a monumental fight. Sophia cried and packed her bags, but in the end she didn't leave. Where could she go? Suspended, transferred to nutrition, and surrounded by rumors. If she left Jake now, she would be completely alone. She gritted her teeth and stayed, living amidst Jake's recriminations and coldness. Jake fell into despair. With no salary, he locked himself at home all day drinking. He didn't have the courage to go to the hospital to see anyone, least of all his mother. Now that he had no money or honor, how could he face her? I knew they were broken. Career, love, honor, everything they once prided themselves on was gone. It was time for me to deliver the final, most cruel blow. I went to the hospital to visit Patricia. Her health had fully recovered. Dr. Sterling told me she could be discharged the following week. I walked into Dr. Sterling's office. He was waiting for me. "Doctor, good morning." Dr. Sterling smiled. "Your mother-in-law has recovered. She can leave next week. What do you plan to do?" I looked at Dr. Sterling, my gaze firm. "I can't take her home right now, doctor. I need to ask you one last favor." "I knew it," he sighed. "What else are you planning? Jake has been suspended. Don't you think that's enough, Claire?" "I want him to pay for being a terrible son." My voice turned cold. "He lost his career, his love, but he still has his mother. I want him to experience what it's like to lose everything, even the last chance to be a good son." Dr. Sterling frowned. "What are you going to do?" "My pharmaceutical company just developed a new generation of surgical sedatives," I said. "A controlled dose can induce a state that mimics clinical death. Body temperature drops, the pulse is nearly undetectable, and breathing is imperceptible. There is a specific antidote." Dr. Sterling was shocked. "Claire, are you crazy? That's too dangerous. I can't do that." "I trust you." I looked him directly in the eye. You are the best cardiologist. You know how healthy Patricia is. If you supervise it personally, there will be no risk. I just need you to put her in a deep sleep for about 30 minutes. For what? So Jake can come and see his mother one last time, I said, my voice like ice. Claire! Dr. Sterling was horrified. Do you realize how cruel this is? Cruel? I scoffed. When he left her in that upstate hospital to die, was he not cruel? I just want to teach him a lesson he will never forget. I want him to live the rest of his life with the guilt of having caused his mother's death. Dr. Sterling looked at me with a complex expression. He saw an unshakable determination in my eyes. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. You are just like your father. Once you make a decision, no one can stop you. All right, I'll help you, but only this once, and you assume all risks. Thank you, doctor. I bowed my head. When? Tomorrow, I said, when he's at his most desperate. I left Dr. Sterling's office. The plan was ready. I called Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison, the time has come. Leak the news that Mrs. Anderson's health has suddenly worsened, that she is critical and may not make it through the night. Ensure this news reaches Jake as naturally as possible. Understood, Mrs. Anderson. The final performance was about to begin. The news that Patricia had taken a turn for the worse and was critical was deliberately spread. Mr. Harrison asked a few nurses who disliked Sophia to casually drop the rumor in the hospital cafeteria. The news eventually reached Jake's brother Ethan, who had stayed in the city to help Jake. Ethan, terrified, rushed to Jake's rental apartment, where Jake was drunk. Jake, wake up! Mom is dying! Ethan cried, shaking Jake hard. Jake, numb with alcohol, lifted his heavy head. What are you saying? What's wrong with Mom? I just heard from some nurses. They say Mom suddenly got worse, that she's critical. She might not make it through the night. You have to go see her. Jake froze. His drunkenness vanished in a flash. He jumped up, staggering. Impossible. Mom was fine. She was getting better. I don't know. That's what they said. Just then, Sophia came out of the room, her eyes sunken. Hearing the news, she was also frightened. But amid the terror, a thought crossed her mind. This was her last chance. If Patricia was truly dying, if they arrived in time and pretended to weep, they could at least save some of their dignity. Jake, calm down, Sophia said hastily. We have to go to the hospital right now. We have to see her one last time. We have to show we care, understand? Jake's mind was blank. He had lost his career, and now he was going to lose his mother. He felt like a complete failure, a sinner. The guilt and grief he had suppressed erupted. Yes, we have to go, he repeated like a robot. I have to see Mom. Sophia quickly pulled Jake along. They didn't have time to change. She was in wrinkled pajamas. Jake threw on a coat that reeked of alcohol. They called a cab and rushed toward the hospital in the middle of the night. They didn't know they were rushing directly into the last, cruelest trap I had set. Dr. Sterling and I had been in suite 705 for an hour. Before they arrived, Dr. Sterling had administered the sedative to Patricia. Are you sure you want to do this, Claire? He asked me one last time. Completely sure, doctor, I replied without hesitation. They have to pay. Patricia fell asleep very quickly. Dr. Sterling checked her vitals. Her pulse was slow and weak. Her skin was cool. Her face was serene, but pale. All right, Dr. Sterling said. The effect will last approximately 1 hour. I'll be in the on-call room next door. All monitors are connected to my room. 30 minutes is all I need, I said. Dr. Sterling nodded and left. I stood in a corner of the room. I turned off most of the lights, leaving only a dim glow from the hallway. The air in the room was cold. It smelled of death. Just then, hurried footsteps sounded in the hallway. The door to 705 burst open. Jake, Sophia, and Ethan rushed in. They froze in the doorway. Their mother, Patricia, lay motionless in bed. Her face was pale, her chest still. The heart rate monitor next to her was silent. Jake, with his medical instinct, was the first to react. He ran to the bed. Mom, open your eyes. It's Jake. He put his ear to her chest, trying to hear her heartbeat. Silence. The coldness of her skin made him shudder. He quickly searched for a pulse in her wrist. It was so weak, almost imperceptible. No, No pulse, no breath. He muttered like a madman. He placed his fingers under his mother's nose. There was no warm breath. "Jake, what's wrong with Mom?" Ethan asked, shaking. Jake raised his head. His gaze was utterly vacant. He just shook his head, soulless, and collapsed onto the cold floor next to his mother's bed. His body convulsed, and a primal groan of despair erupted from his throat. He was completely broken. Sophia, seeing the scene, let out a sharp cry. "It wasn't me! It's not my fault!" she screamed, and then she fainted in the doorway. The performance had reached its climax. Just as Sophia fainted and Jake collapsed, I stepped out of the shadows. I wasn't alone. Behind me came 2 nurses and Dr. Sterling, who had, coincidentally, arrived after hearing Sophia's scream. "Oh my God, Mom!" I cried, my cheeks already streaming with tears. I ran to the bed, but I looked at Jake. "Jake, Sophia, what are you doing here?" I screamed, pointing at his face. "Mom was sleeping. The doctor said she needed absolute rest. Why did you burst in here screaming? Why?" Jake was still in shock. I turned to Dr. Sterling, who was examining Patricia. Dr. Sterling held a stethoscope to her chest, frowned, and shook his head. "Doctor, how is my mother?" I asked, my voice trembling. Dr. Sterling looked at me, then at Jake. His gaze was full of disappointment and anger. "Dr. Anderson, is that you?" he said. The patient had just stabilized. I warned the staff that no one should disturb her. "Why did you and that woman burst in here shouting? Do you know how dangerous a strong stimulus is for a cardiac patient?" Jake stammered. It's you! I screamed, rushing toward Jake. "You killed her. Mom was fine the whole time I cared for her. As soon as you 2 appeared, this happened. You're bad luck. You killed her." My acting was perfect. Jake's brother, Ethan, believed my words. He started looking at Jake and Sophia with hatred. "Don't you dare!" I yelled in Jake's face. Look at this." I ran to the nightstand, pulled out a document I had prepared, and threw it at him. Jake picked up the paper with trembling hands. At the top, in bold, was printed, "Certificate of Death." Below were Patricia's details, and the most important part, cause of death, acute cardiac failure caused by severe emotional shock, and the time of death, 10:15 p.m., the exact time they had burst in. Dr. Sterling's signature and the hospital seal were clearly stamped. Jake looked at the certificate, then at Dr. Sterling. Dr. Sterling turned away and sighed. We did everything we could, but the shock was too much for her. That sigh, that turning away, was the final confirmation. Jake looked at the death certificate, looked at his motionless mother, and heard my accusations. He believed it. He believed that his and Sophia's appearance had dealt the final blow. He hadn't just been a terrible son, now he was his mother's killer. It was a debt he could never repay. "No!" Jake screamed one last time, and his eyes went blank. He simply stood there motionless, a soulless corpse. He was breathing, but he was already dead inside. The nurses woke Sophia up. As soon as she opened her eyes and saw the death certificate, she screamed again and fainted once more. No one paid her any mind. The hospital was in an uproar. Nurses and doctors whispered in the hallway. "Poor woman," one said. "Her ex-daughter-in-law cared for her until she recovered, and as soon as her son and his mistress show up, she dies." "It's karma," another added. "He abandoned his mother when she was sick, and now he shows up to play the good son." It was too much for her. Jake heard everything. His brother Ethan ran up and started punching him. "You killed Mom. Are you happy now?" Ethan shouted. Jake didn't resist. He deserved it. Dr. Sterling signaled security. "Enough. Get Mr. Anderson out of here. Take Miss Sophia to the ER. And Dr. Anderson," he said, looking at Jake, "you are no longer an employee of this hospital. Please leave." That sentence sealed Jake's fate. He staggered out of the room, through the hallway of accusatory glances. The performance was over. After everyone left, the room fell silent again. I dried my fake tears. Dr. Sterling walked in and locked the door. He approached the bed and administered the antidote to Patricia. "Your play," he said tiredly, "was crueler than any I've ever seen." "I only taught him a lesson he deserved, doctor," I replied calmly. "That death certificate," he said, "is now an official record. On paper, Patricia Anderson is dead. We have to get her out of here before dawn. I've prepared a car at the basement B2 exit. From today on, to the world, your mother-in-law is gone. I understood. This wasn't a discharge, it was an escape. I stood by the bed, watching as color slowly returned to Patricia's cheeks. I whispered in her ear as she slept, "Mom, it's over. I'm taking you to a quiet, peaceful place. A place without Jake, without hypocrisy. We will start a new life." That night, I secretly took Patricia, still asleep, out of the hospital and brought her to a luxurious assisted living facility on the coast that I had prepared. The next morning, while Jake and Sophia were still living in the hell they had created, the hospital officially announced the death of patient Patricia Anderson. Jake was fired from the hospital for moral misconduct. No other hospital would hire him. He lost his career and his future, living the rest of his life with the crushing guilt of believing he had killed his own mother. Sophia, upon waking, couldn't bear the reality. She left Jake. Their true love ended in hatred and blame. My revenge was complete. I didn't take their lives. I only took what they valued most. Jake lost his honor, his career, and his peace of mind. Sophia lost her prize, and both would live forever under the shadow of a ghost I had created.
Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. How have you been? Have you been nurturing your dreams lately? Today's story delves into themes of healing, responsibility, and the courage to love, even when it's daunting. Ava Mitchell, a dynamic creative director in high fashion, and Tom Callahan, a stoic and calculated CEO, both epitomize success and emotional fortitude. However, an unforeseen night, unplanned and unspoken, initiates a journey neither anticipated, a journey that won't just reshape their futures, but force them to face who they really are. So, take a moment with me. Let me tell you a story, one that began not with love, not even with hope, but with one quiet, unexpected night. It was celebration night at Mason Vera, a luxury fashion powerhouse based in Chicago. The company had just smashed sales records nationwide thanks to its latest campaign, The Real Shape, led by none other than Ava Mitchell. At 27, she wasn't just the youngest creative director in the firm's history, she was the one rewriting the rules. Everyone around her celebrated with laughter, music, champagne, but Ava, in a deep sapphire satin gown, quietly stood by the towering windows of the 42nd floor, watching the city glow. The skyline sparkled like gold dust, a million stories unfolding below her feet. And yet, her own heart felt still. Maybe success didn't always silence the ache. "Quite the view," came a low voice behind her. Tom Callahan, the man behind the empire, 36 sharp, strategic, untouchable, the kind of man who never raised his voice because he never had to. He wore his power like a tailored suit, perfectly fitted and impossible to miss. "Congratulations," he said simply, no charm, no flattery, just truth. They stood in silence for a moment, and then they talked. At first about work, numbers, projections, campaign reach, but slowly the conversation slipped into something softer. She told him about her mother, a nurse who raised her alone, working double shifts just to make rent, yet never once forgot to show love. He paused, then spoke about his father, strict, unbending, obsessed with legacy, a man who called vulnerability weakness. And his mother? She was quiet, he said, and eventually she disappeared into her silence. There was no music, no flickering candlelight, just a shared bottle of wine and two people sitting on a leather couch as if it were neutral ground, talking, listening, slowly unraveling. And then, a kiss. Soft, slow, and then everything else stopped. Not out of passion, not out of romance, but because in that moment they weren't CEO and director. They were just two tired souls, no longer willing to face the night alone. Some truths don't need to be shouted. Two faint pink lines sufficed to upend Ava Mitchell's sense of control. 6 weeks after that night, she sat curled on the cool tile floor of her River North apartment bathroom. The third pregnancy test lay in her trembling hands. All three said the same thing: positive. The kind of positive that flips your life upside down. She stared at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the poised, unshakable Ava the world knew. Her curls were undone, her lips pale, eyes wide with fear. "Mitchell, women don't break," she whispered to her reflection. "We bend, then we rise." Her mother had raised her alone while working night shifts as a nurse. She taught Ava that survival wasn't about strength. It was about choosing to keep going even when everything inside you wanted to stop. So, Ava stood up, wiped her face, put on a flawless navy pantsuit, and went to work. At the office, she functioned like clockwork: meetings, presentations, emails. But the nausea was getting worse. And every time she passed Tom Callahan in the hallway, her stomach twisted, not from the baby, but from everything unspoken between them. They hadn't spoken about that night, not once. Until Monday morning, after a long, draining strategy session, Tom said, "Mitchell, a word in my office." Her heart skipped. Her fingers clenched around the file folder, but she followed him in, head held high. He didn't look up as he typed on his laptop. She stood, waiting, the tension thick. He began to speak, but she beat him to it. "I'm pregnant." Flat, direct, like ripping off a bandage. His fingers froze. He finally looked at her. Really looked. "Are you sure?" "3 tests, I'll confirm with the doctor." Silence fell heavy between them. He leaned back, folding his hands. "What do you want?" It wasn't curiosity, it was caution. Ava's blood went cold. "Excuse me? Money? Support? A promotion? Just tell me." It wasn't his words that broke her. It was his tone, like she was a crisis he needed to contain. She stood, fire in her eyes, voice barely steady. "I don't want your money, Tom. I don't want anything. I just thought you deserve to know." Then she turned and walked out, her steps steady. Her heart? Not so much. Tom Callahan prided himself on maintaining unwavering control over numbers, people, and outcomes. Even emotions, to him, were variables to be managed. In his world, feelings were luxuries, distractions, weaknesses. But that morning after Ava had left his office with those quiet, cutting words, "I just thought you deserved to know." Tom sat still, unable to move. He didn't chase after her, didn't say a word. He just stayed there. In an office bathed in morning light that suddenly felt colder than ever. Ava walked quickly down the hallway, her heart pounding, but she didn't cry. Not because she wasn't hurting, but because she had long stopped placing hope in men like Tom. She hadn't expected him to stop her, hadn't expected an apology. She didn't even need him to care. But what hurt was the way he looked at her, like she was a glitch in his perfect system. That afternoon, Ava submitted a formal request to transfer to the company's California office. She wasn't quitting, she wasn't running. She simply wanted to become a mother, without judgmental stares, without unanswered silence, without a man who couldn't show up but still tried to control things from a distance. 1 week later, Tom called her into his office again. "I received your transfer request," he said. "I'll start handing over my projects this week," Ava replied calmly. He nodded, but something had shifted in his expression. It wasn't cold. It wasn't soft either. It was conflicted. "Why are you leaving?" he asked, more gently this time. "Because I need space," she answered, "and because I don't want my child to grow up with a father who isn't present but still wants control." He said nothing. Ava stood to leave, but halfway to the door, she turned back. "You know, Tom," she said, voice steady, "I once thought, maybe underneath all that ice, you were a good man." He looked up, "But maybe I was wrong." Her voice didn't accuse, it didn't blame. It was just disappointment. Raw, quiet, real. "But that's okay," she added, her eyes calm. I grew up with an amazing mother. I didn't need a father to become who I am, and neither will my child." Then she walked out, no shaking hands, no hesitation, and Tom, for the first time in years, felt a strange, unfamiliar sense of loss. Not because he was losing a brilliant employee, but because a woman who once believed in something good inside him no longer did. Some shocks don't come from loud explosions or dramatic confrontations. They come from silence. The kind of silence someone leaves behind when they walk out of your life. For Tom Callahan, that silence carried Ava Mitchell's name. After she walked out of his office with those quiet but piercing words, "I just thought you deserved to know," Tom was no longer the same. On the surface, he remained the perfect CEO, punctual, composed, sharp as ever, but at night he couldn't sleep. Instead, he sat alone in his downtown penthouse, reading article after article on pregnancy, development stages, symptoms, timelines. He didn't fully understand why he was doing it. All he knew was that he didn't want to repeat the pattern of his father. Tom's childhood was made of long, suffocating silences. His father, a respected lawyer, treated emotions like a disease. In their house, achievement was the only form of love. His mother, she was always there, physically, but emotionally she had long disappeared. Her quietness built a wall that Tom carried into every adult relationship. He had never told anyone this, not until his first session with a therapist. When the doctor asked him why he came, his answer was short but honest. "I don't want to become him." From that moment on, Tom began to learn from scratch how to sit with uncomfortable feelings, how to recognize pain without running from it, how to see that control wasn't strength. Sometimes it was just fear wearing a tie. One late night, after wrestling with himself, he sent Ava an email. It read, "I'm trying to change, not for anyone else, but because I don't want to hurt anyone again. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but if you're willing, I'd like to learn how to show up." There was no reply. But the next day, Ava accepted a coffee invitation from him, just a quiet cafe in a quiet neighborhood. Not to start over, but to see if the man who disappointed her was truly trying to be better. Tom arrived early. He ordered ginger tea and plain crackers, because one article mentioned it might help with morning sickness. When Ava walked in, her eyes were guarded, but when she saw the tea and the tiny plate of crackers waiting for her, something in her expression softened, just a little. They didn't talk about that night. They didn't bring up the hurt. Instead, they talked about her OBGYN, about birth plans, about what it felt like to realize there's a heartbeat growing inside you. Tom didn't pretend to understand. He didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. And for Ava, in that moment, a man who could simply listen without trying to control, without hiding behind logic, was already a small beginning. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic, but something real. Neither of them expected the storm to hit so soon, loud, brutal, and without warning. Just days after their quiet meeting at the corner cafe, Ava was packing up her office, preparing for her upcoming transfer to California, when Olivia, her closest colleague, burst in with a look of panic on her face. "Have you seen the news?" she asked, holding up her phone. The headline blared across the screen. "Maison Vera CEO in alleged affair with subordinate, stock drops amid scandal." Ava froze. The article didn't just mention her and Tom. It painted a narrative suggesting the pregnancy was the result of a backroom deal. It called her a manipulator, accused her of trading intimacy for influence. Even her transfer was twisted into a strategic retreat to dodge consequences. The cold cruelty of those words cut deep into her pride, into her identity as a woman who'd fought for everything she had. Her phone lit up with messages, calls, and anonymous comments flooding her inbox. But Ava didn't cry. She straightened her blouse, took a deep breath, and walked toward Tom's office, knowing exactly what waited for her on the other side. Inside, Tom was in a meeting with legal and PR teams. His face darkened when he saw her. "I'm sorry," he said softly, and for the first time his voice carried no command, only regret. The PR spokesperson was preparing a press statement. "We'll deny everything," she explained. "Say the relationship never existed, that the transfer was entirely personal." But before Ava could respond, Tom stood. His voice wasn't angry, it was resolute. No, we're not lying, we're not hiding, and we're certainly not going to let anyone shame the mother of my child." The room went still. Then he turned to Ava. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she didn't see fear of public fallout. She saw protection, sincerity, a man standing beside her, not above her. 1 hour later, at an emergency board meeting, Ava sat beside Tom. He didn't flinch, didn't deflect. He looked the board straight in the eye and said, "Yes, I'm the father of Ava's child, and no, she did not need favors or leverage to earn her place in this company. Ava Mitchell is one of the most capable professionals I've ever worked with, and the first person who's ever made me question the kind of man I want to be." The room fell into stunned silence. Then, unexpectedly, the CFO, usually the quietest person in the room, spoke up. "We stand by your decision," he said. One by one, heads nodded around the table. That afternoon, Ava didn't walk out of that boardroom as the center of a scandal. She walked out as a woman who had defended her dignity and kept her ground in the eye of the storm. And Tom Callahan, the man who once lived only for control and image, had done something he never imagined. He chose the truth, he chose her, he chose their child. 3 days before her scheduled move to California, just as Ava thought things were finally settling after the media storm, her body sent a different message. A sudden wave of dizziness hit in the middle of a Zoom meeting with her future team. Her screen blurred, the voices faded, and the next thing she remembered was waking up in a hospital bed, an IV in her arm, and a doctor speaking in a voice both calm and firm. "Your blood pressure spiked too quickly. We need to monitor you closely. Travel should be avoided for now." Ava nodded, holding back tears, not from fear, but exhaustion, the kind that comes when you've tried to be strong for too long. She clutched the freshly printed ultrasound photo the nurse had left on her bedside table where that tiny heartbeat still pulsed strong, and whispered, barely audible, "Please stay safe, little one." Tom didn't hear about it through a medical update. He heard it from Charlotte, his younger sister, who called him at 5 a.m. while he was reviewing quarterly projections. "You should know," she said without preamble. "Ava was admitted last night, alone." The last word hit like a slap. He didn't hesitate. He dropped everything. No logistics, no strategy, just instinct. For the first time, Tom wasn't the calculated CEO. He was simply a man who knew he couldn't bear the thought of repeating his father's absence. Not this time. 3 hours later, Tom arrived at the hospital, still in his suit, hair tousled from a rushed flight. When he stepped into the room, Ava was sitting upright against her pillows, clearly startled. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Being here," he replied softly. "No explanations, no agenda, just presence." As the nurse came in to recheck her vitals, Tom stayed quietly beside her. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He just held her hand, gently, warmly, genuinely. For the first time in weeks, Ava didn't feel the need to be composed or strong. She wasn't a director or a strategist. She was simply a woman, scared and tired, and the man she once thought incapable of softness was right there, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to be. After the checkup, they sat in silence, bathed in the soft glow of the hospital light. Then Tom turned to her and said quietly, "This time, I'm not running, and if you'll let me, I'll stay, for as long as it takes." Ava looked at him for a long time, not to search for an answer, but to read his face. And what she saw wasn't the cold, impenetrable CEO. It was a man, still learning, still flawed, trying, honestly, to love in the only way he knew how. And for the first time in months, she nodded. Not because she had forgotten, not because she had forgiven, but because something real was beginning to change. 2 months after the night Ava was hospitalized, winter finally began to loosen its grip on Chicago. Spring crept in quietly, soft light through windows, gentler winds, and a sense of something quietly shifting. Life hadn't changed overnight, but something between Ava and Tom had. They didn't talk about us, didn't rush to name anything, but Tom stayed. He didn't ask what she needed, he simply started doing. Bottles washed, blood pressure tracked, sitting beside her during checkups, saying nothing, just being there. And then, on an early March morning while the city still slept under a blanket of fog, their daughter arrived. Following over 8 grueling hours of labor, Ava was rewarded with the sweetest sound. Her baby girl's inaugural cry. Tom stood beside her, his gloved hands trembling, eyes wide and shining with something he didn't have a name for, something like awe. The doctor placed the baby in his arms first. She was tiny, flushed, eyes still closed, but her fingers wrapped around his the moment she touched him, as if to say, "I know you're here." Tom froze, not in fear but in complete surrender. For the first time in his life, the world didn't revolve around him. He was just a man, holding something more important than anything he'd ever built. When he passed the baby to Ava, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their eyes met, and tears filled them both. Quiet, warm, real. "She's beautiful," Ava whispered, her fingers brushing her daughter's cheek. "Her name is Sophie." "Sophie Callahan Mitchell," Tom repeated, tasting the name like a promise, a new beginning. Ava's recovery was slow. Tom didn't leave, not because he had to, but because something in him wouldn't let him be anywhere else. He changed diapers, learned to swaddle, took shifts holding Sophie while Ava slept. Sometimes he just sat quietly by the crib, listening to her breath and letting his world grow still for the first time. Ava didn't speak of the future. She didn't need to. There was still space between them, but something had softened. Each time she saw Tom hold their daughter, with clumsy hands and reverent care, something inside her softened too. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was trust. And for her, trust was everything. When they left the hospital, they didn't walk out hand in hand. They didn't kiss, but they walked side by side, like two people willing to try. Not for romance, not for the picture-perfect ending, but for a little girl with sleepy eyes and a name that meant clarity. Without rings or grand vows, a shared glance conveyed, "We'll embark on this journey, not flawlessly, but with all the goodness we possess." Thank you for staying till the end. If this story moves something inside you, let us know in the comments. And remember, love doesn't always begin with fireworks. Sometimes it starts with a whisper.